getting on Instagram as well. What is up, everybody? This is Gaby, Staten Island on the Craft Growers Network, and we are joined with my co-host and partner, Notsodog, Dominic Corva. Caleb will be joining us briefly. He's got some internet connection issues. And then Michael Wolf Segal, also known as the Farmer in the Sky. We've done a podcast with him before, and it was by far one of the best podcasts we ever did, probably one of the best podcasts we ever will do, because, you know, people have called me an OG in the past, which is just complete nonsense when you put it into perspective of like who Wolf is and people that he know. Like, he's a real OG and he knows the real OGs, and he's going to be telling us some stories today about real OGs in cannabis. But before I start, I wanted to take a moment and honor a friend of mine. Her name is Riley, and she passed last week. And so last week we were unable to do a podcast because Riley was down. She was in the hospital, and I want to tell you everything that happened to her. And I would like to encourage everyone to burn one down with us. So before we get going too far, everybody roll one up, grab your bong or your dab rig, however you like to consume, and please help me honor my friend Riley as we start today's podcast. So I'm gonna light this up, and then I'm gonna tell you guys what happened to her. Oh, and by the way, before I start, Plant-Based is his name on Instagram. It's Plant-Based something 978 or something like that. He sent me some Mendo Perps number 54 times Bubba Kush. This is from CSI, but this is Mendo Perps Leaning, and I'm really enjoying smoking this. And so it's some of the best herb I have right now. And so I figured light up the best in honor of Riley. So last week was a really hard week for my family and friends of my family, because our friend Riley passed. And hold on a second, I want to open up the chat, live stream chat. Here we go. And I think I even saw Plant-Based on there already. Oh, Plant-Based is a good guy. Thanks. Let's do this all for Riley today. So anyway, Riley was just 18 years old, and she's been a friend of my family, you know, forever, like since she was born, you know, or a couple of years old. And, you know, she would babysit for my kids, you know, the last, you know, few years. She was our babysitter, and, you know, super close with our kids. She's not really our niece, but we kind of consider her our niece because out of not knowing what else to call her, she's was far more than a friend. And anyway, I don't remember what night it was. I think it was like Friday or Saturday night. She went and saw Maroon 5 at the Chase Center. And she came home with her girlfriend, and they went to bed, and she had a heart attack in her sleep at 18 years old. And she doesn't use drugs. They did a tox screen on her, and there was nothing in her system. She didn't use any drugs, and nobody like dosed her with anything. But in the middle of the night, she had a heart attack, and when her girlfriend like woke up, she noticed that she wasn't breathing and she seemed to be like choking on something. And she called her mom that knows CPR, and they called the paramedics that showed up there very quickly. But we don't know how long Riley was gone, not breathing for, because they were sleeping. And so the next day she went to the hospital and they induced her in a coma. Hey Wolf, do me a favor. I'm gonna mute you real quick because you got a weird sound coming. So they induced her in a coma to try to like let her body heal. And there were some positive signs. Like they tried to like hurt her by pushing on her nails and stuff, and she reacted. And when they moved her breathing tube, she reacted. And so we were hoping that maybe the following day she would come back. And but the next day they said that she was brain dead and that she wasn't going to make it. And what makes this more difficult and yet beautiful at the same time was, she was only 18 and she had just gotten her driver's license. And she registered to be an organ donor. And something that I didn't know about when you're an organ donor is like when you're on life support the way Riley was, sometimes they choose to like keep you alive a little bit longer so that they can coordinate who's going to get the organs. And so they kept Riley going for a couple more days while they could figure out who was going to get her organs. And I don't know, I'm losing track of time. I think it was on Saturday that, they finally operated on her and took out her organs. Before that happened, they did what's called an honor walk, which was one of the most intense and beautiful things that I've ever seen in my life. So before they took Riley to the operating room, there was 50 people in her hospital room. I'm certain that's against some type of rules, but because she was 18 and all these people reached out, there was 50 of us in her room. And everyone was just telling Riley that they loved her. And then after that, they wheeled her out of the room, and there was at least 150 people lining the halls of the hospital, all to honor Riley as she went on her final walk. And it was something like just before this happened, Riley's grandma asked me to record it. And I don't know why they asked me to do it. Like, I don't know that they know like how seriously I take like recording things. And I used to record weddings and bar mitzvahs and sweet 16s with my dad. He had a company where that's what he did. But I never did an honor walk. This is a total first for me. And so, but like, because I was asked, I, took it seriously and I did it. And so like, we walked all the way like around, the hospital, and there was 150 friends and family that lined the hospital hallway, all to honor Riley. And it was one of the most beautiful things that I ever saw. And when she got out of surgery and she was laid to rest, she had saved 6 lives on that first day. And like, so we don't know what happened to Riley. They don't know why she had a heart attack. It's just kind of a mystery. But like, one of the things that I'm thinking of is that You know, like she gave her life to save all these other people, you know, and she's already saved 6 lives. She's going to save countless more. She still has another kidney that she's going to give. She's going to give her eyes, her corneas, so that 2 people can see. She's giving her bones to people that have cancer. And it's just like an amazing and tragic thing at the same time. And, you know, it had me asking myself, you know, like if somebody said, hey, would you give your life for somebody else? I'd say, well, depends on who. You know, like I'd give my life for my kids and for my family, you know, but, you know, well, what would you give your life for? Still, I don't know that I'd do that, you know? But like if you knew that if you gave your life, you would save countless people and give vision and light to people, you know, would you do that? And I'm not saying that I would, you know, because but you know, it's an interesting question, and I'm just proud of Riley. Like even in her death, she was able to do something good, you know, and like, you know, while it's super sad that she died at 18, like people are going to remember her and her legacy is going to go on forever. So I hope you guys are all burning one down for Riley, and we're going to dedicate this podcast today to Riley. And I'm going to put in the chat, not the Instagram chat, on the YouTube chat shortly, I'm going to put her GoFundMe. You know, they did a GoFundMe for $20,000. They've already gotten more than that. But I would still encourage everybody, if you can, to send her something. One thing that I wanted to see if we could pull off was make a scholarship to honor Riley. She was going to beauty college when she died, you know, beauty school. And so I thought it would be cool if we could arrange a scholarship so that we could send, you know, somebody every year to go to this beauty school in honor of Riley. So before we get on to the podcast, I just wanted to remind every one of you to tell the people that you care about and that you love, that you care about them and love them, and that you make the most of every day, because we never know when our last day is going to be here. My mom died at 47 years old, and I thought that that was ridiculous. And now just thinking about what happened to Riley, I don't even know what to say. So, again, I'm going to get fucked up on this podcast, even more than I was in the last one. Last one I was like so dabbed that my eyes were crossed and I was super tired. But like, I'm going to just burn the entire time. And I hope you guys understand that we didn't podcast last week. Also, last week I didn't really get out orders and stuff, so I appreciate everybody's patience on an understanding for what I was going through last week. And before we go, since I told you guys that you should tell the people that you care about that you love them, I wanted to take this moment to tell Notsodog how important he is to me in my life. And my life would be nowhere near what it is today if he wasn't a part of it. And I fucking love him, and I wish he was here to hug me right now, because
Oh, man.
I really kind of need it. But I still wanted to do this today. And I'm sorry that I'm not being as strong as I wish I could be. And I saw that I made Wolf cry too. But yeah, I love you, Francis.
I love
And
you too.
with that, I'm just going to mute my microphone for a minute so you guys don't have to hear me crying. And I'm going to turn it over to Dominic so he can introduce Wolf, who, like I said, man, you will not hear stories like you're going to hear today anywhere else. So, with that, I'm going to let you guys go. I'm going to just mute myself for a minute.
Wow. Thank you, Gabby. Thank you for sharing that. What a powerful peace circle. You know, I'm just honored to be a part of it, to have been witnessed that and been a part of that. And you just let it feel, Gabby. Just let it feel, ma'am. We're sending hugs for sure.
Thanks, brother. I need it.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. But you've given me the responsibility of moving on to Wolf, and I'm going to honor that responsibility as well. And so, uh, Michael Wolf Segal and is a man I met probably 13, 14 years ago in Washington State.
1 second, buddy. Hey, Wolf, we've got a problem with your
Yes.
microphone. That there's a lot of like
Really?
background noise on your microphone. So, can you see how to mute your microphone on the screen? Like if you hover over
Just checking
yourself,
which.
there's a mic button that you can press that would mute it.
Towards the bottom left of the
I think
screen.
he found it because
Yeah.
I think
Okay.
you found it too because the static went away.
yeah. So when you're talking, make sure that you're not muted, but you might have to mute yourself when you're not because it's kind of disruptive. So go ahead, Dominic.
Okay.
Yeah. Met him in Washington States, right as Washington legalized in 2012. People often seem to either forget about it or have not engaged with it as much. But Wolf was there, up from Oregon, as I recall, where much of his career has been spent as a man who was there for the drug war. He was in the drug war. He was a drug war victim. And in particular, Wolf worked with Tom Alexander of the Sensimia Tips fame, and pioneered the Sea of Green technique, really important part of his legacy, and got busted and did hard time, like a lot of it. It might have been 10 years, as I recall. And so he was out, and Washington State was opening up, and it was a beautiful moment in time for community formation. And I was blessed to meet Wolf, probably through our problematic, but on my part, beloved friend Sam Wayne Smith. Donnie Wirtschafter, you know, like just like the legends that were in Seattle, you know, like, well, Wolf was there too, right? So it's a real pleasure because I haven't spoken with him in probably about 9 years, 8 years since, you know, that whole thing crashed. You guys in California don't really realize like how much like community was crushed in Washington fast and before California even legalized. So, you know, there was the, you know, exodus back to Oregon, I would presume, but I really haven't spoken with Wolf since then, and it's just wonderful to see him. And so, you know, part of what we're doing here is this is not officially part of the Legacy Genetics project, but it's basically, you know, kind of the same thing that I do or attempt to do, usually in one-on-one interviews, but in a public group setting. And so, like, it is important for everybody to realize that, like, you know, this is a public archive that we're producing on the web. And, we may be talking about things that were illegal in the past. And so proceed at caution, at your own caution. But that said, Wolf, what I'd like to do with that introduction is to just ask you about your family and geographic background, and then how you came to meet the plant. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, it does, because I really was pretty much set on my path before I was born. My parents were Greenwich Village beatniks. I end up telling it a lot. It's a fun story. My parents were Village beatniks. They hung out in what was the cultural capital of America, Greenwich Village, in the 50s, as far as music and poetry and dance. All of these things were still very much New York centered. And my parents were part of that circle. My father was a musician. His day job was as second violinist at on the Carnegie Hall Symphony Orchestra, and then his preferred gigs were that he was a studio musician and a jamming musician, and anyone would come to town anytime anyone would come to town, a jazz musician, a hill music musician, and they needed a violin player or fiddler, they would get crazy A.B. Segal, my father. Well, their circle included a lot of very famous names, among them Jack Kerouac, who, the reason I mention him specifically is Jack plays a huge role in how home growing came to the West Coast, and how the cannabis movement and growing your own came to California in particular because of one of his traveling companions. But anyways, Kerouac was one of my family's friends, and while I was in utero, my mom puffed reefer, her term, all the way through that pregnancy. So I may be the only person on earth who can honestly claim to have smoked pot with Jack Kerouac before they were born. And that just tickles the shit out of Gaby. And I'm glad, because I like seeing you smile, Gaby. You made me cry with that, because I've lost half a dozen people in the past year. And that so sucks. In fact, to have it be a kid, just it ripped me up. But
I saw.
when you're ready, because one time, like dealing with the grief, cry ugly, cry really, really ugly. Let all of that pain and all of the missing them, let that come out, and then spend the rest of your life living in a way that honors their memory. And that's the best thing we can do for those who have gone ahead. But anyways, getting back to my mom and stepdad, or not stepdad, but my mom and father, and those people, that was their crowd, and it included some amazing people. It included Kerouac, it included Mary Travers from Peter, Paul, and Mary. It included Sally Gross, who is basically the mother of modern American dance, and her daughter runs the Houston Modern Dance Troupe. Rachel does. It included a lady named Shandy Tatarsky, whose son, Andrew Tatarsky, basically is the dean of harm reduction drug abuse treatment. So it was a hugely influential little group. And then those folks, I do see it on the chat, Gaby. Those folks went on to be a huge influence everywhere. But Kerouac, on the road that becomes the On the Road trip, what he wrote the book about, one of the people that was there with him was Neil Cassidy. Cassidy is the bridge from beatniks to surfers to what would become hippies. Because Cassidy is Kesey's friend, and Kesey is both borderline bohemian and surfer, kind of, and part of the California Northern Lights bookstore, Topanga Canyon Bunch. So that's where that bridge comes. And on their way, as they're headed west, they stop off and visit a friend. This comes from Martin Booth's Cannabis, A History. They stop off and visit a friend in, I can't remember if it's El Paso or Laredo, but it's one of them. And this friend is the first person, let me get this right, the first non-Hispanic person I know of, or have read about, or have heard about growing north of the Mexico-United States border for use in as a social lubricant. And Cassidy and those guys come out, and when they get out here to the West Coast, they tell the surfers, and those surfers are buying bootleg from our friend, one of the people I've cried about a lot, the late Jim Matheson. Remember Jim? Adam, head of the herbivores. Okay, and Jim used to tell
Yes.
a story about one day his boss came to him and said, handed him a shovel. That is the nexus where Cassidy and them are now influencing the West Coast. Cassidy tells Kesey about it. It kind of there's a little bit of it that goes on up in the hills, up around Northbrook and that in northern San Diego County and up in the La Jolla area for the surfers, but it really jumps up to Kesey and them up by Eugene. And that's where Bill Drake comes into it. It's where Tom Alexander comes into it. It's this huge piece of the overall cultural spread. Um, and that brings us to me, because this actually there was a point in this. That brings us to me reading Bill Drake's book one afternoon in August of 1970. And then later on that day, going out for a pharmaceutical vision quest, which a lot of us were into doing that day. And while I'm out on my pharmaceutical vision quest, which was some really wonderful sugar cube that had supposedly had Sandoz dropped on it, um, I encounter the goddess Ganja. Now, for those who maybe aren't familiar with Hindu mythology and the Hindu pantheon, Ganja is one of the attributes of Kali, who is the goddess of destruction, who is one of the facets of Shakti, Shiva, the destroyer of universes, wife, or well, consort. So, and destruction is not a bad thing. I mean, we need to get out of this Western creation good, destruction bad. Destruction is how you clear the ground for what comes next. It's part of growth and rebirth. It's harvest. You know, here we are destroying the plants so that they can attain their next piece. And one of the things that I don't know where I picked it up along the way, but I learned that Om Shiva Shankara Hare Hare Ganja is a mantra that if you say it while you're consuming, you're invoking the consummation of Shakti and Shiva's lovemaking. So our getting high is their orgasm. Uh, that's sort of like a side note, but that's part of that. That's what when actually I might have learned it from John Wayne Smith, our mutual friend, because I believe he told me about the sadhus doing that, and he had spent quite a bit of time over there becoming a sadhu.
We really covered a lot of ground quickly there.
Yeah.
Well, you kind of,
Let's bring it back on.
I mean, in
So-
the first 3 minutes of Wolf's telling stories, you can already tell, folks, that this is going to
So-
be a doozy.
I have just one simple question, and then I'll shut up.
Thank you.
When you were talking about them going west and meeting their buddy in Texas, who was the first person that you knew of that was growing cannabis in America, was that like in the
The-
mid
the first-
50s?
Hispanic. Yes,
Yes,
that was
yeah.
on the road trip. So that's like 5 or 6 years after the first guy who gets busted for violating the Tax Act.
Okay,
Yeah.
It
so
was, I think, in
I'm just trying to
47.
get like what year you
Yeah.
think it was, roughly.
I think 53 is when that trip happens, but I'm not
53.
positive.
Okay, that's kind of what, because you were
And
like,
those
that's the
plants were
first.
being cultivated in Texas. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
He was.
Yeah,
My
By Nick
understanding,
Cassidy?
white guy.
he was
Say
saying
again?
it was the first
Cat-
white
Cat-
dude he knows.
Cat-
of.
By
them.
Neil Cassidy in particular?
No,
Okay.
not by Cassidy in particular, but he's on that trip, and they meet this guy, and he tells the people up in no Fallbrook, that's the name of the place, not Northbrook, Fallbrook, up in North San Diego County, about it,
Okay.
and
Okay.
that's where it ties into the bootleggers and the surfers. and Jim Matheson and those guys. And I think probably we start to see the branch that becomes Farmer Tom and the medical co-ops
Mhm.
many years later.
Right.
But that's the top part of the tie-in there
Yeah, yeah,
as
but like
well.
in terms of
You're doing
genetics, are you saying that they got seeds? Well, I mean, like they would have been
no,
just
no.
bag seeds, that
Or did
just
they just
I'm
spread the
saying
idea?
the cultural that just that oh you can grow here. We're not just importing it. The
Right.
I mean grow your own, but homegrown, right? It used to be what you smoked when you couldn't find Mexican.
yeah,
And with like this whole bunch of people growing, I mean, you're better positioned. I don't know much about, like, Donnie Wirtschafter. Donnie can tell you about Ohio
yeah,
and Meigs County.
yeah, yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
that's a huge piece of our history.
yeah,
Schenectady, Woodstock, those people on the East Coast who were doing it in the late 50s and 60s, but
yeah.
it it didn't explode the way it did with the hippies
Right.
and the
Well,
back to the land
yeah,
movement.
especially so California in particular is where it exploded, and that's kind of part of like what we're trying to get at is
Yes,
like, why, what was it about California that made it,
which now I'm back to the goddess Ganja who shows me my future, and I realize that it's too late to start a crop that year. It's August. And now at 14, which is how old I am in 1970, I was one of the three or four biggest pot dealers in a college town called Bellingham, north of Seattle. And now, earlier in 69, I had met this Mexican guy who had an uncle. And the uncle was well connected. Um, La Familia. And so at 14, I have college kids driving me down to Portland twice a week to pick up 10 and 20 kilo batches to take back to Bellingham and sell as lids and pounds. Except that at that point it wasn't pounds, it was bricks. And most of them were kilo bricks rather than what
so
the
not homegrown, but
downsizing the commercial
Mexican
pattern.
imports. You would be picking up Mexican imports in Portland.
Right, Mexican influence. So that right. So there's these seeds, and I'm selling. But I've read the book, and there's a passage in the book in Bill Drake's The Cultivator's Handbook. That took me away from there, didn't it? I'm trying to pull it up because it was such a. Sometime, Gaby, I'll send it to you, and you can read it because anyone who hears it will be inspired by it. But
What should I look
uh,
up?
it is Bill Drake in the Cultivator's Handbook of Marijuana, 1969/70 edition, where he talks about the quantum leap and relates it to light and how light it is the photons and electrons leaping out and then falling back, and the light comes off the falling back from the compression of the energy. And when you're high on acid and thinking about this, it's pretty. And
Hold on,
and part
before we
of
go any
this,
further, are you high on acid right now?
yes.
Okay, I thought so.
Oh, don't I wish? I've got some shrooms here that I'm probably going to eat here in the near future, but I've got codeine in my system, so I don't want to do that just now. Got anyway.
Hey, just so everyone
So
knows,
I encountered
this is
dinosaurs.
hold on, Wolf. Let me say something. This is not even Wolf at his best, folks. Wolf is kind of hurting right now. He's on codeine and he's suffering with some pain. And this is what you get from Wolf when he's like all codeined out. So, like I said, this guy is the best. And just to put it this way, we've told Wolf, and I'm gonna repeat it now. He needs to have his own podcast on, he's invited to do it on our network because, he has to talk really fast because he has so much to say and there's just not enough time in life for any of us to hear all the stories that this man has. It's just, they're incredible. So, Keep going,
I'm,
buddy.
I'm actually almost to the California part of this. So it's
Don't rush. We're
1970,
good.
and I'm a big pot dealer in Bellingham, and I start saving seeds because my plan is that next year, 1971, I'm going to go out and I'm going to play Michael Marijuana Seed. And I started saving seeds, and as some of us remember, there was a lot of seeds in Mexican pot at that time. And so I saved up a bag of seeds over from August of 1970 till it was late May of 1971. The bag was about yay big around and about yay big. So call it roughly a pound, pound and a half of seeds, give or take someplace between 25 and 35,000 seeds. And my modus operandi was I had someone drive me down to Portland because hitchhiking at that point was a great way to go to jail in Washington. They wouldn't write you a ticket. They were busy putting hippies in jail, and only hippies hitchhiked, according to the state patrol. Now in Oregon, if you could actually have a sign that said where you were going, you couldn't hang your thumb out, but you could do it standing next to the freeway on the freeway. So I decided that what I was going to do was in quotes, pick up every stitch, which is a line from a Donovan song, The Season of the Witch. And we had interpreted pick up every stitch as meaning try to get every understanding of what someone says. It's like, well, they could have meant that, and they could have meant this, and they could have meant that, or any combination of them. And these things that happened could mean this or could mean that. So I went with that the names of places were a sign of places I should head to grow. Let's see, Santa Cruz sounds like a trip where stuff is going to get brought to you, right? It's a Santa Cruz. Weed. Yeah, right. You're not going to plant pot in weed. How about Grass Valley? So these were my destination places. Big Sur, because I'd heard stuff about Big Sur. And then any place along the way that I got dropped off, or if my gut said, hey, this is the place, I would have my ride let me out, and I'd walk up till I couldn't hear the road, which most of these places was like a minute later because they were dropping me off in the mountains when, we'd pass the stream and I'd go, oh yeah, this is it, let me out. And then I'd plant on the riverbank or stream bank or lake bank because I like the water, and I'd walk back down to the road and I'd hang my thumb out. And if it took too long to get a ride going the way my thumb was pointed, I'd go across the road and go the other way. So that was late May of 71 through, I'm going to say, about the middle to end. I can't tell what that is. Earl Hill, huh?
Oh, don't worry about it.
Ah,
I'm just showing
okay.
what I'm
So,
just showing what I'm gonna smoke. Keep talking.
very good. So I have them drop me off. I walk back down to the road, and I plant there. And I honestly believe, given how many places I planted and how many seeds I planted, I know that people started planting up there with the Back to the Land movement in 69, 60, well, 68,
Earlier than that.
68, 69.
Earlier than that.
With, okay, all right. I love hearing more about it, but I know that a lot of it happened up there then. But I am inclined to believe that I was one of the first 100 people to plant any given place that they grow today, north of Big Sur, west of the mountains, and south of Eugene.
I mean, and then you also covered Grass Valley, you said, and Shasta,
Yes,
weed. Well, I mean,
yeah.
you're
Weed and
invoking. Yeah. I mean, it
voting
fits.
the end rectangle.
I mean that is the greater cultural economy of cannabis region. What you just described. Um, so my question is, how did what was the relationship of like Oregon genetics and California genetics in that interaction? Were they flowing north,
Honestly,
or were they
at, at,
flowing
at that point, this is all Mexican seeds that I've been saving
all Mexican seeds?
from, yeah, from kilos.
Hmm.
Remember, we're talking about 1970. I had, I think, maybe a few Thai seeds, but I think someone had said, "Hey, I want those," and I'd
Okay.
given them to them.
Yeah.
Not many. There
And
wasn't a lot of seed in Thai weed.
did you tend these gardens in all these different places?
No, no.
Yeah.
This was strictly a Michael marijuana seed type thing. You plant
Right.
and go. I planted. There was about 2/3 of an acre that was the biggest patch I did out by Wonder, which is out in the area around Tacoma, Oregon. If you go, if you cut over at Grass Pants, if at Grass Pants, if you cut over to the coast, you pass by you go through Wonder and Miracle. You're a little north of Tacoma. You cut down through Cave Junction. There used to be an octagonal house, maybe 50, 60 feet north of the highway. I don't know, might have been 9 to 12 miles out of Grass Pants.
Mhm.
Sorry, Grants Pass. And that was sort of where I stayed. I left a book there that I had written a bunch of stuff in, and that book apparently affected a number of people because I've heard stories about that book being what they ran across that got them planting in that area. But other people had already planted. I mean, when I was there was a really big, uh, if you went down, but there was a little town that basically was a general store that you turned left if you were headed west to get down there, and everyone out there was growing.
Mhm.
So it was, and that's 1971, and it's pretty well established. And I'm fairly sure that the river that ran through there was the Illinois.
Mhm. That makes sense. And so, like, these are all kind of
So you've got a real clear idea now.
back to the landers, basically, in Oregon.
Yes, yes, yeah.
Basically,
BTL was pretty much. I mean, I don't remember people moving out there to grow rather than growing being what they did because it was tough to get a job as a logger with hair down to your back.
yeah.
Um, but I have that being right in that time period. Because 1974, a friend of mine comes back up from Santa Cruz and talks about the boys, right? And at that point, we're starting to see some fairly substantial commercial operations. I'm not because I'm up in Washington. You know, I'm still guerrilla farming big ass blackberry patches.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, that's sort of my California tie-in.
Okay.
That and getting a lot of pot up in Washington that came from down here and doing seeds, a lot of seeds.
Nice. Wow. Uh, Caleb, do you have any questions about anything so far?
How rare were the Thai sticks, I guess, relative to the Mexican kilos, and like what different types of people would be smuggling that in versus the Mexican brickweed?
um, my best guess on the Thai, because I didn't know any of the people that were themselves that were bringing it in, but I knew some of the people that were getting it. One guy in particular who plays a big role in Neville's thing a little later um, had been part of Graves' registration and those stories about heroin in the corpses' bellies. There was also Thai sticks that came over in bales on C4. I think there were C-47s. There was coffins full of Thai that came over. Well, except it was Laotian, not Thai. But um, I had prior to 1970, I had Thai stick maybe half a dozen times. I had Acapulco Gold once or twice. For exotic names, I had Red Cambodian and never got any Panama Red. I had Acapulco Gold that my friend Frank uh, Did you ever eat at Francisco's out on Friday Harbor, the Mexican restaurant that's got the this is aimed at Dominic. That's got
Yeah,
dock that runs out through there.
yeah.
That
I know
guy's
what you're talking
uncle
about.
is who I was talking
Yeah,
about.
beautiful place.
Yeah. Yes. Well, that was my connection to the Mexicans. Was his uncle was them, and
It's like
I
this.
met him selling helixes.
Your dogs are barking real loud in the background, Wolf.
Getting them to quiet down takes. They'll stop in about a minute. They're hard to.
Okay.
I wonder if I can do. Hang on, half a second. Where is it? This is actually a fairly new thing for me. I'm going to take it down a little. Does this? Am I still fairly easy to hear?
Yeah,
Yep.
Do you
Yeah.
hear me at all?
yeah,
Yeah,
Okay,
we hear you.
then we're good. And it should
you're
be a
clear.
little quieter and a little less staticky.
Yeah.
Okay, good. I had it up too loud. And I think we are also hearing the air conditioner, which, given that it's 80 something, stays on.
Yeah.
um,
Poor Wolf
okay,
lives
so
in San Diego where it's 80 something today.
Oh, you're in San Diego
We're
now.
but
we're
I'm a
all hoodied
Pacific
up.
Northwestern. I'm a Pacific Northwesterner. The cracks between my toes are cracking, or the webs between my toes are cracking. My gills, I have to rub oil on them to keep them from closing down. It's not good. Actually, I like it, but what I like about it is I can grow outside year round.
Hmm.
That's the best thing I can say about San Diego.
I think Caleb has
You
a
grow
question.
some long flowering stuff.
Flowering,
Long
I like
flowering.
depth carts.
Lo-
Lo- Oh, long flowering.
Yeah.
Some of it. Basically, what I'm doing is depth carts. Right. I don't have the physical layout to do depth houses, so I've got those utility carts. I fill them with soil, and I do sea of greens with 20-ounce solar cups set into the top of the utility carts full of soil. So veg is under I've finally have my own high energy induction lighting at long last, so I start them under that and then flower them under the sun, and as we get into winter a heater will go out to be with them, and when the days are too short, because there actually is a pretty substantial effect on potency and the overall chemical ensemble that's there. If you make sure to have the heat and you make sure that you get at least 12 hours of light a day, you get pretty decent. You can drop down to 10, but I don't much like it. I want, given that I have a plant that will flower under and be in full flower under. Dominic, you'll love this. How about a plant that's in full flower on the longest day of the year in San Diego, outside, and not an auto?
Wow. Yeah.
Northern Cali needs it.
I mean, I've seen actually plants that were. I don't know if they were flowering. It was like in November. Sunshine's dry farm years ago. Um,
Yeah.
she was doing a winter crop, and even that far north. Um, but yeah, so let's get back to your journey. Um, Tell us about, I guess, like the 1970s. Where were you? What were you doing? What were you growing?
In 1971, up through really about 75, I'm growing the seeds I find in what I'm smoking.
Hmm.
And but the quality of what I'm smoking is moving up quite a bit. Uh,
Hmm.
I've got some sativas that are good. I've got some Thai weed, but Hawaiian starts hitting Seattle. Um, in particular, my mom brought me back a bud about yay big of Kona Gold that looked like a not quite ripe banana in color, that was literally hallucinogenic. I mean, for anyone who's taken acid and had the effect of for me, it's like about an hour after the peak. It's sort of like I'm on a roller coaster, and reality is going past me as I'm on the roller coaster coming down, and so on this cone of gold, it was like I had smells and feelings of Hawaii right after a rainstorm. There's a particular the combination of the ocean and the jungle and everything. Am, am I muted or am I heard? Okay,
No, you're heard.
you
You're
are
No,
heard.
heard.
we're listening. I
I
yeah, I
mean,
hear you fine.
this is
So,
like literal pure
it
water.
smells. Yeah, it smoked so good. You can taste and smell where it was grown, and it just I was there, not physically, but I was there
I
because
have a
of the
couple of
smell.
questions about back then. Since you were like
Yeah,
a teenager, um, did you did you have anyone that could help you grow? Did you know any like did you grow certain things from seeds that like never finished? What was your plan for like where did you dry? I mean, obviously it sounds like you have cool parents, so that's like a giant uh help, you know. Did you like bring weed home and dry it in your house? Like how did I'm just
home left
curious
me for
about
the last time when I was home left me for the last time when I was 14. I
okay.
am the product of serial abandonments. My childhood, in terms of family and such, yeah, my mom was cool, but she also wasn't cut out to be a mom. She was mainly cut out to cut out. Um, but I was fortunate. I ran into, I mean, I don't think any other time in our history could I have run into the hippies that took me under their wings as a baby hippie and who gave me a place to crash and who taught me
In
how to
Bellingham.
be a civilized human being in
I mean,
Bellingham. Yep.
Yep.
even when uh I was, you know, going to see dead shows and stuff like that, which was like obviously the way tail end of the whole thing. Runaways or people like yourself that you just described that, you know, there was a significant portion of people that would see shows that came from situations like that, you know, and you
Yeah.
know, like
Because
the
because because that was our family.
and hippies would take you in and you could travel
That was
around and you get fed and all that type of stuff. There was a decent amount of runaways or just people that had been abandoned, in
yes,
my
there was.
opinion.
I kind of think that you could say that anyone that was living on Dead Tour was a runaway. If not
Mm,
from parents, they were running away from the society, that was outside of Dead Tour. Like,
yeah.
I
So,
mean,
I mean, I just want to get back to it though. So because my whole thing is like you're growing in the Pacific Northwest, right? Right. That's where you
Right.
got started, and the stuff that you're describing
Yes.
Northwest.
comes from like much warmer, you know, completely different climate type places. So I was just curious, like, were you mostly growing Mexican because that's what your buddy's uncle or what have you had? Did that Mexican
That's
finish?
that's because that was what I had was seeds. And the first crop that I got indoors to finish, because there's this big watershed moment. Um, that's 1970. God, part of me wants to say 73. Part of me wants to say 75. Steve Murphy, the owner of a place called the Indoor Sun in Seattle,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
starts. He writes a book called How to Grow Marijuana Indoors Under Lights.
I have it,
And as
yeah.
it happens, I live like 12 or 14 blocks from there, and it's like 3 blocks from the Ave, which is where I was selling pot at that point. uh, 69. I'm running over to Hippie Hill on the University, which is 2 blocks off of the Ave, to get my pot from the hippies over there that are the fronts, to go over and sell it for $2 more and a pinch from the lids from people walking up and down the Ave. I mean, it was
It
open
was a
street
very
bazaar,
countercultural
much
place.
like yes, much like I understand the Hashberry had been a few years earlier. I have a description of how social stuff spreads. It's like you drop a rock someplace and then you get the ripples out. Well, the ripples of hippie, late 68, 69, and late hashberry, like when it starts getting drugged out, like too many drugs, too much speed, too much heroin, that hits the Av 69, 70. Um, I got grabbed up as a dependent child because my mom and her boyfriend, stepdad, I guess he eventually was a stepdad, but they got him busted up on Kodiak, uh, selling hash to a minor, and I got grabbed like later that day down in Seattle, not related, but I didn't have ID and I was underage. My grandma flew up from Puerto Rico to get me out. I ended up in Bellingham with some friends, and that's sort of how I ended up in Bellingham in early 1970. Um,
That might be the
and at
first
that point,
story
like,
I've ever heard where you're like, I got busted, but my parents had also gotten busted that same day in a totally unrelated bust. So, Mike, I just had wanted to throw that out there. I'm sorry to interrupt, but yeah, my grandma had to come get me because my
no,
parents.
I think pretty much every one of Wolf's stories is one of those stories where I've
Yeah,
never heard that before. I,
yeah.
I mean, he said it before and he said it in my other podcast, but my favorite thing ever is hearing Wolf tell the story about how his mom smoked herb with Kerouac while he was in her belly.
Yeah.
He's like, I smoked weed with Jack Kerouac before I was born.
Because did your grandma have to
yep.
come get you because the cops wanted to release you to a adult member of your own family? Was that, or did you just need
Pretty
somebody to?
much, I wasn't going to get released unless a family member came and got me. I was
Right.
14. Someone who had been my mom's best friend before she decided to become a hippie and take off back into that world. Um, but Leslie, my mom's best friend, had gotten a hold of my Aunt Sarah and my grandmother is who flew up to get me out. We went up to Bellingham where I knew some people, and where my mom had known some people. And fortunately, this is sort of a side thing to it. I've been involved in alternative education in Summerhill type schools. Uh, when I would have been in seventh grade, I got put in a school in upstate New York for crazy geniuses. Excuse me, but the New York Board of Regents certified as a school for emotionally disturbed children. Um, but what it was emotionally disturbed geniuses. I don't think none of the kids had an IQ under 140. Um, so it was a lot of fun because smart kids don't usually get kids as really smart kids don't usually get kids that are really smart to play with or to hang out with, or adults who understand them and are willing to cut them slack in how they need to learn. But there was a Summerhill type school in Bellingham, and that was why my grandma and Auntie Sarah took me up there, was because maybe there'd be a place I could stay there. And then the hippies who were running that, it was much looser than a Summerhill school. It was basically something you could tell the cops, so if you were a teenage hippie, you wouldn't go to jail. Um, but they took me under their wing, and they made me a human being. They made me care about other people. They made me want to be liked as opposed to not want to give people a chance to reject me. I don't want to, I'm getting too much about the deeper psycho stuff and don't really, that's not really what we're here for. So,
I don't know. I mean,
in
hold
terms of,
1 second though. The only thing I'll say about that is that, like, although the overarching theme of this thing is weed based or whatever, I kind of
yeah,
think people from that type of like, it's like weed is countercultural. Weed is like rejects get drawn to it. People with like, like that's part of Herb's story is, like I was saying about like Dead Tour or whatever and Runaways. It's like you get introduced to it, you get rejected by the cool kids, but the pot smokers take you in. You know what I mean? And the dude in the leather jacket that listens to heavy metal like sells you an eighth, and then like you have a buddy. And so I think like through generations, like there's been different people that have been introduced to Herb. And so that's like, it basically sounds like your parents weren't very responsible and you had to start hustling when you were essentially an 8th or a ninth grader. Would you say that's correct?
Let's see. It's taken me a
14.
very long time. It's taken me a very long time to get to this point in my head where I can honestly say I understand that my mother was the result of her upbringing and that she did the best she was capable of doing. That said, she shouldn't have been a mom, etc. But she was. I'm here. Whatever I have managed to contribute to my field of human endeavor, which is cannabiculture, is the legacy I'm going to leave, which is why I'm a little obnoxious. I mean, people will tell you there are a lot of people who really don't like me because I'm very pushy about I want my legacy to be known because it is. My grandchildren are the only kids I leave. When people are growing sea of green 3 or 4 or 5 generations, human generations from now, I want them to know I was here. That's why I was so disappointed when the town I was trying to buy in Oregon to make a a cannabis-centered destination resort town, company town out of Tiller, Oregon. It would have been renamed to the Tiller Homestead Community. It had been the winter home of the Cow Creek Band of the Umpqua Indians. Then it became a mining and logging thing, and it was it, the grade school was going to be the American College of Cannabiculture. I had a building picked out to be the Dr. Todd Hero McCluria Center for Integrative Healing and Research. I had lined up 2 doctors, a compounding pharmacist, and a registered nurse to work in it. I found half a dozen people who would put up the second $1 million. No one would put up the first. Dominic, I got that general idea when John Wayne Smith and I were looking at that place out by Chehalis that didn't work.
Yeah.
That's when I started going, wait a second, this is just, and then someone turned me on to this town for sale. $6 million would have bought it. Yeah, and it would have been awesome. It would have been, you know,
Yeah. Well, I mean,
the,
Sam Wayne
because
Smith definitely talked about that sort of thing quite a bit.
yes, he did. Yes, he
Yeah.
did.
Yeah. Um, Bellingham, you guys are close to the Canadian border. Are you having any kind of, adventures across the Canadian border?
As a matter of fact, out by Silver Lake in northern Whatcom County, there was a farm. Now, they sold it decades ago, so I feel okay saying this, that belonged to a family named the Stuthofs. Their farm sat on the border, literally. It backed to the border. And one of the things that the Bellingham hippie community was very strong on was what we called the resistance, resisting the war in Vietnam, helping people who did not choose to go to Vietnam to make that choice. They could go to Canada if they wanted. Now, the person I regard as like the older brother I should have had and was lucky enough to have life bring me, George Kenneth Fox, did time for refusing to be inducted. He one of the reasons he's my hero is he not only didn't want to serve, he didn't just go to Canada. He stayed and said no. He did what was right, I think. He went to prison. They put him in Safford, Arizona's prison camp for a couple of years. One of the things that I did on that trip when I did the Michael marijuana seed thing is I left my stash for a while at the Octagonal House and hitchhiked down to Safford. No idea what the federal bureaucracy was going to do to me or with me. And I showed up at the gate there and said, hey, I want to visit Kenneth Fox. And I guess I flabbergasted them because I'd never filled out a visitor's app, never been through the investigation process, none of that, but they let me see him. And I got to meet David Harris, who he was tutoring at that point, because David Harris, Joan Baez's husband, was in with Kenneth in the prison camp in Safford, 1971. But yeah, those people, I think that may be why Canada is smarter. We lost too many smart people to Canada during that time. Anyways,
Maybe. I think there might be other factors.
Bellingham. Yeah. Bellingham was close. A lot of hash came across that line. You know, it was COs north and hash south,
Mm.
and that was also, and it went. But that, from what I understand, like there was a carpet store um, in downtown Bellingham, and that carpet store was, as far as I know, the northern end of the Brotherhood pipeline for hash,
Mm.
because we were getting a lot of the really nice, the Afghani primo that they were bringing in the surfboards.
Did the Brotherhood pipeline of hash ever include other types besides Afghani? Was there a period where there was Lebanese hash or other types?
I got Lebanese hash from the guys who had that store. I got Red Leb and Blonde Leb from them, but I don't know the Brotherhood story well enough to be able to say. I mean, I know a little bit. I know about like the mystic arts and like that, and I know about the Brotherhood pipe and people finding the party out in the canyon by listening for the sound of people coughing from a person height hookah that they put an ounce of primo in a time and dropped heated rocks in on. I mean, I've heard the stories about people finding the party by listening for the coughing and like that. But I no, Dominic, if you can find Bobby, if you can find Big Bobby Andrus or any of those people, their stories belong as part of what you're doing about the California cannabis culture. They really do.
We, I've had some conversation with like people who were connected to the Brotherhood, but not any direct folks. It's a little hard to find, basically. Um, but if you got to connect, hook me up.
Okay, well, I'll put word out and see. Well,
All
you
right.
know, at the worst that happens is nothing happens, and maybe you'll get someone with. See, because the Big Sur Holy Weed and that whole story about the Big Sur Holy Weed and
Mm-hmm.
Jim and those guys. There's I believe there's a link right there because where my mom encounters the Brotherhood when she's down here is in Big Sur,
Mm,
and then goes from there to Laguna.
yeah, that would make sense. And that was what years? Early 70s?
That would be 69 and 70.
69, 70. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay. Yeah, that would have been peak Brotherhood about then, before they all got busted. And
Yeah, that's before the Weatherman and Leary.
yeah, well, Leary was ongoing. But
Yeah.
so this is you're in Bellingham for how long?
I lived in Bellingham from January of 1970 on and off for the next, let's see, the last time I actually lived there was for a while in 75. But I I moved down to Seattle in 72 and did a lot of planting out in the Kent Valley before it got developed. And it was actually out in the Kent Valley that's why I was so excited to learn about indoor growing. I had done a really big patch in the area where South Center, the shopping mall is. That used to
Yeah.
all be blackberry bushes.
Oh wow.
And I had done
South Center
yeah,
Mall.
I had, yeah, I mean, that was all blackberry bushes. Think about how big a blackberry patch that was. And I had tunneled back in there and planted a few hundred plants. And there's this one plant that, okay, my mind wants to make her bigger than she is or was, but I'm 5'5" these days, 5'4" ish, somewhere in there. She's probably twice what I am now, so 11 or 12 feet, and I had never seen anything like this. I'm talking like a 4 or 5 foot flower crowning center stem, and I'm like, all right, I think I can give her another week. I'm gonna come back and get this. Is gonna be the best crop I've ever had. And I come back and there's like a few plants sticking out from underneath bulldozed field. And having lost plants to deer, robbers, mold, that bulldozing was kind of the last. So yeah, that would have been 75. Or no, no, 72 or 3. Yeah, 70. First year I'm down in Seattle. Anyways, it just, it broke my heart. You
Mm.
know, it was like I wanted to grow so badly. Well, actually, I wanted to grow so well, but so strongly, and it just. And then here's this book. Steve Murphy puts out the book, How to Grow Marijuana Indoors Under Lights,
Yeah.
and that book came out in, I want to say 75, but it might, yeah,
Mm.
75 because Finest Finest comes out in 77, I think.
I'll look at my copy, but I think it's earlier. I think it's 72.
Okay,
73. We
let's
can
see.
check that though. It's not that big a deal. Where
Yeah,
did you grow indoor under
but
lights? Where? Like on the Ave?
in Ballard,
On Ballard?
no, actually, in Ballard, up on Crown Heights,
Okay.
63rd between 63 up on the bluff, overlooking, basically overlooking Elliott Drive.
So like
So
a
where it
pretty
goes out to the park there,
middle class neighborhood.
down at the water.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very middle class.
Very
Although at
middle
one
class neighborhood.
point
Yeah.
of the 6 houses on my block, 5 of them were being grown in,
Yeah.
and not by me. One by me, one with someone else and me, and the other 2, 3 by people that my friend knew. To answer whoever popped that question up just now, I will be 70 next. I'll be 70 in January. Oh hell yes! Whoever Van Ripster, I agree. That German black hash, which was usually Afghani or Paki, was screaming. I just glanced over at the chat.
Okay.
That was Primo I'm talking about.
Don't get distracted by the
Um,
chat. You got too much to say.
Yeah.
okay, so so up on 63rd, and under VHO Grow Lux lights, Luxor VHO Grow Lux, and I got all the way to flower. Now they weren't big flowers, but they did flower, which I probably took down a month early. Um, and what I was doing would kind of foreshadowed my whole involvement with canopy control, because what I was doing was using staples and pipe cleaners to take the branches and put the branches over against the walls, because it was in a closet under the stairs from the basement to the first floor, and the light hung out of the end of that closet by probably 2 feet. But I'm using staples and pipe cleaners to hold the branches back, and that sort of eventually leads to low stress training, or plant, or as we used to call it, plant bondage, but I guess that's politically incorrect these days, like
I don't know
half the
why it
stuff
would
I
be.
like. No, well, because bondage implies, ooh, kinky sex, perhaps I mean, it's like, really, come on, have a sense of humor,
I
people.
think
See,
bond. I think bondage is cool again.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think there's a
yeah,
problem with
oh,
bondage.
Yeah.
You can break out your
I
gear,
see.
Wolf.
All right.
Not so. Is that the finest, or is that just is that under, or the
So
finest
this
under?
thing right here, I
I
was
saw you
looking at it
wave.
because you mentioned it. It looks like I have the second book because it says, I'll read it to
Yes.
you guys. It says, in 4 years, over 300,000 people have learned from how to grow marijuana indoors under lights. Now Murphy Stevens brings the technology of indoor cultivation up to date with information about the new 1000 watt metal halide, pruning, curing and drying, complete growing supply catalog in back. And
And
so I guess I don't have the first one,
so
but
what's the
he's
date on this one?
This one says 1979. So if they were
Oh,
saying
so
4 years
75.
before,
75.
75.
Yep,
But it was
he's
kind of
right.
crazy
Yeah.
Yep.
just from like a perspective. If this is true and over 300,000 people, one of them being Wolf, got the first edition of this book,
Yep.
like that might have
Which
been a
came out of
wildfire.
Seattle. Which
Yeah, of
came out of
knowledge spread.
Seattle, right where Wolf was.
Right.
Right. So the indoor
Right. And
sunshine.
remember that this is 15. Remember this is 15 years after Bill Drake's book.
Yeah.
And
That
so
that
in the
Steve Murphy's
back,
first book comes out. And
after reading
yep.
Steve Murphy's book, he's got a whole mini catalog of lights and nutrients and stuff you can order so you can take the knowledge you just learned,
Yep.
you know?
Genius.
Anyway, I'm not trying to
Steve
interrupt too
Murphy
much, but I just had the
very
book,
sharp
so
business mind.
I
He
just had the
told
book,
me
so I figured
some
I'd look.
stories that I don't think I can repeat on the air until he's dead.
Yeah.
You know.
Okay, so did he tell you about he must have talked to you a little bit about Herbie and Herbie naming
A little
Sea of
bit.
Green.
I interrupted
'Cause
right when you were talking about the nexus of cannabis and bondage, and then I tossed my 2 cents. But so anyway. But yeah, no. I mean, I know a
that's
bit.
gonna be a clip right there.
That's
That's gonna
gonna
be a
be a
shoot.
clip.
Yeah, exactly. I
I
interrupted
if
you.
you. So one thing
and
that
Murphy. Go ahead.
I would like you to talk about, because that was like a question I asked before about like how obviously like Bellingham, like some of these areas in Washington don't have the greatest climate, especially from sativas. So I would imagine that like the Pacific Northwest, they started growing out of necessity indoors because they could make a
Yes,
climate where they
that
could
was
get
a
this
big
stuff to finish. Like it wasn't like
yes.
California.
You can grow weed actually, like in Seattle. I mean, yeah.
I mean, I'm just saying, Dominic, from my experience, like trying to grow Acapulco Gold and Mexican and
Man,
various sativas.
they had the predecessors to Northern Lights up there already.
Yeah,
There was
so
already like breeding that was going on in the Canadian, archipelago, the islands,
yeah, the islands up there for
Victoria, and all
sure.
those that stuff. Like they were,
The
So,
Gulf
they
but
Islands.
were already
before
adapting it.
we get to when, so what year did you start growing indoor, Wolf? After you read that book?
1975.
75.
Yeah,
1975.
1975. Oh, but now for historical accuracy, the first lighting recipe for growing cannabis appears, as far as I know, in Mary Jane's Superweeds, The Connoisseur's Guide to Cultivating Cannabis.
Right.
That's 68 or 69. There's one book that I know of before that in modern times about growing for recreational use, and that's by someone Langdon Brown or Langdon something or other. Dave Watson made me aware of that book. It
Yeah.
preceded Mary Jane Superweeds, then there's Mary Jane Superweeds book, then Bill Drake's book. But Mary Jane Superweeds book actually had a lighting recipe. Bill Drake talked a tiny, tiny bit about growing under lights, but no one really. It really was Steve Murphy's book that's where it explodes.
Yeah.
It's like if those books were the sex, his book was the orgasm.
Well,
It's when it got out there everywhere and reproduced.
okay, but but also like there was a network of book distribution, like all over the West Coast and then out to the East Coast, and Vito Perillo, Vito.
Yeah, Andor.
I
Was
don't
it
know
he
about
Andor
Andor.
or was he
I don't know, but Vito was
Homestead?
talking about like they'd print the books in Seattle and drive them all the way down to L.A. and all sorts of things they were getting up to.
I mean,
Uh,
one kind of theme I've thought of, like especially back when you were talking about Cassidy learning about growing weed north of the Rio Grande in Texas and bringing that knowledge out to people in Southern California. I feel like knowledge spreading about weed because it wasn't native and it was kind of forbidden was a big part of it. was different isolated groups, and then these books and these things that you're talking about that like all of a sudden people learn and they're like, oh, I can try this, or I have a path that I can do this. I can grow. And so it's like if you lived in Mendocino, like where I'm at, or you lived in Southern California, maybe you'd try it outside. If you lived in Seattle, you might quickly have, after a couple failures and like some bulldozing and some cops and some thievery, might be like, well, maybe I'll do it in this sealed room that nobody knows where it is and get away with it, and I can make it happen. I just thought about like sometimes like necessity is the mother of invention,
Yeah.
and and pushes this kind of thing forward, maybe. And now I'll
Well,
shut up.
Oh, definitely.
But also the books pull it forward. Like the information gets out there and circulates. And so like there's the organized effort of getting those books out and the kinds of social networks that those people had, usually in the counterculture.
I mean, if that's true, and over 300,000 copies of Steve Murphy's first book sold,
Yeah.
that's 300,000 people that were interested in growing marijuana indoors in the mid 70s.
Yeah. And they
And
were
how many
sharing it with
times
their
did they
friends.
share it? After
Yeah,
they
and
did
how
it
many
once?
people did, and how many people saw what they were doing and was like, oh my God,
Yeah.
like I want to try that, like, I mean, that kind of stuff, you know, um, yeah, I mean, I wasn't even born in 1974, 75. So, that's like the very early beginning of
Yeah.
indoor.
But that actually reminds me, this comment reminds me, uh, there was a lot of outdoor growing out in like Omak, Washington, like northeastern Washington. What's it called? The Okanagan,
Mm-hmm.
and like that was a back to land community in Washington State that was also, you know, using the Canadian border,
And Vancouver Island
in
and
Vancouver
places
Island
like
for sure. Yep.
that,
That's right.
there was
Yep.
pockets of things,
Mm-hmm.
popping up and such. So, you
Yeah,
know,
I'm sure like San Juan Island, I'm sure like, those are all still kind of like highly gentrified hippie places. Those islands in the Puget Sound.
I got a question for Wolf. When you were starting, did you ever grow any, doesn't matter where it was, did you ever grow any like equatorial stuff where you just realized that it was never going to finish and you kept checking it and it just never finished, and that was like you
Actually,
realized.
that for a very long time, that was what I thought all Thai weed was like. Was that if you tried to grow Thai, you would get frustrated because of how long it would take. It would, it, it just wasn't really good for what I was trying to do. I mean, I was trying to get, I was trying to grow good pot, but I was also trying to get pot that would make money, that, would pay the bills. And starting in about, I want to say, 80, I moved down to Portland from Seattle in 85, and the people around Greg McAllister, Northern Lights Greg, and the guy that
Mm-hmm.
everyone seems to know as Indian Greg or Indian Don, we were starting to see people trying to cross the fastest ties with the stoniest ruderalysis to try and come up with a fast, stony kind.
Okay.
How
And
did you get
and
to know?
now I
How did you
moved
get to
down
know this?
here, down to Portland. Say again?
How did you get to know Seattle Greg
Say again?
and so forth?
We met. Okay, we met at Hydrotech when I was the general manager there.
Okay, so you're working in a
Um,
ancillary.
oh yeah, in late 1980. God, I forget if it was 3 or 4. Um, I fucked up and blew a really, really good job working at night in a beer and wine warehouse. And for about the previous 2 or 3 years, I've been coming into Hydrotech as a customer. And Kevin, the owner of the company, liked to talk at least as much as I do. And let me see. And so I would frequently be waiting to buy whatever I was waiting to buy while Kevin was still taking care of the customer ahead of me, and someone else would come in. And it got to be almost a joke that every time I came in to buy something, I would end up waiting on the next couple of customers and selling them stuff while I was waiting for Kevin to get done. So when he heard that I had managed to blow this good job that I had, um, he offered me a job doing production. And so I needed a job, so I said okay. But then it quickly became obvious that for me to be doing production when I could be selling lights was just not the best use of my time. And right around then is also when a couple years earlier, I'm pretty sure it is '83, because '79 to '81 is when I figure out Sea of Green. '81 and '82, I'm still playing with it, trying to figure it out. '82 '82 was when I did the first one and really liked it. '83 is when we wrote about it. So yeah, '83 is also when Sea of Green is starting to happen, and it's when I've helped Kevin and them develop the eight-sided paraboloid reflectors that are or were, the ultimate. Well, they were good enough that PL, Poot Lighting, which is a division of Hortolux Schrader in Europe, stole the paraboloid design as a liner for their reflectors that were used in commercial agriculture. So, as would happen with some other things we came up with along the way, but
So when you were
the
doing when you were
development of the
figuring out
kit,
Sea of Green, what were you
yes.
doing it by that point? Were you working with like shorter like Afghan stuff that you had gotten, or what were you working with when you started to play
Yeah,
around with the idea of
but,
lots of
by
small plants type? I was just
by
curious.
that time, by that time, quite a few varieties from California had come up, mostly from California. I mean, typically, for instance, the one we called Calgany hash plant. And purple Calgany hash plant, right? California Afghani hash plant. And when I say hash plant, I'm talking about a plant that you can take the buds, tear a chunk off, and you smoke it like it's a piece of hash. You have to relight it. That's what hash plant is. It's not just a plant they make hash out of. It's a plant that, you're growing basically hash. Yeah, you can take it further. But that was the true wonderful Calgany hash plants, and I loved them. But Sea of Green was born of necessity. Growing out east of Kent at Creston Airport in a hangar, I come home and there's a notice on my door that PG&E, Pacific Gas and Electric, wants to come do an audit next week because I'm using an awful lot of electricity. Well, that didn't make me very happy. And I call them and they say, well, when can you do it? Well, I'm going to be, let's do it week after next. I then go and rent a U-Haul truck and buy a whole bunch of wardrobe boxes, and I take my whole hangar full of plants that are like 3 to 4 weeks into flower, and I put them in wardrobe boxes, one on the bottom, one over the top, and I've now got this truck full of mature plants, maturing plants that stink, that I've got to put somewhere. And I've got a friend who grows, like you mentioned, the Okanagan, and you mentioned northeastern Washington. There's an area up around Davenport at one point. Right around then, the Douglas County Sheriff had said the only way I'm going to bust someone for marijuana is if the feds come and drag me by the nose to where I have no choice about it. These are people keeping their ranches, people keeping their dairies. I want to get reelected. I'm not out to mess with my constituency. Dominic, were you able to hear all of that? hope, because I just noticed.
Yeah, we hear you just fine.
So
Yes, 100%.
okay, so that was
Yeah.
okay. So that's up above Davenport, out by Hunters and Nispelum. But interestingly enough, that scene, the guy who came back from Santa Cruz and told me about Du Bois down there growing, and the big scene that was starting to take off around Santa Cruz, was the guy who started all those people on Kelly Road up above Davenport, which was really where that spreads out through the extreme northeast of Washington. That's about 100 to 200 miles east of the Okanagan and the Tonasket Republic Curlew area where a bunch
Yeah.
of people were doing it.
Okay.
But that's where the extreme northeast. There are definitely a branch of the California thing because of Mike Reeves going up there, starting that with the I won't say their names, but with some people who had a dairy there.
Yeah, so I know some old hippies in Humboldt who actually were in the Okanagan first, and they came out in the early 70s.
Huh.
But like you're talking about, like even further east basically than the Okanagan, so that makes sense.
Yeah. At one at one point, I owned 300 acres up by Tonasket. That was before my 3 years of coke. I went from having all kinds of stuff to living in a car that was up on jack stands. That it ended up, I lived above a synagogue for a year and a half after that. Pretty interesting growing pot plants and solo cups in the window of the synagogue or the apartment above the synagogue.
And what years were
Ended up,
those? When were you in Tonasket?
that would be 79, 80, 81.
Okay.
Oh,
So, like,
Tonasket,
were you connected?
that's, yes.
Were you connected to the folks that did the barter fair and had the Okanagan just kind of the Okanagan?
I went to a number of barter fairs over there. I wasn't connected to them, but I was regularly invited to and did. Um, God, my most vivid memory was trading a pound of yellow lead for a Remington 870 shotgun at one of them. And oh wait, no, I've got one you'll like. At the Curlew, not the one at Curlew, but the one that's over east of Okanagan, at the barter fair there, the cops showed up, a sheriff and a couple of stadies, and there was like 3 rows of tents and booths and vendors. And and I'm sitting up on top of a school bus watching, and as the law enforcement are coming down the line, you can see people putting their scales and things down under the table, and like 2 or 3 after them, you can see them bringing it back up. It's like something out of a Cheech and Chong movie. It was pretty good. I mean, I miss the cannabis community. Okay, yes, evolution says we need a cannabis industry, but my heart was still back there with my community. And don't get me wrong, I was making a lot of money growing a lot of pot, but I also got to do a lot of good. People that know me know I put, in the years before Green Merchant, I put $250,000 into fighting prohibition. I regularly dropped money off at homeless shelters. I regularly made anonymous donations to the things where they pay old people's energy bills. For me, it's always been a political statement. If you don't have the right to pursue happiness by changing your state of mind, whatever that takes, how do you have the pursuit of happiness? And so, to me, growing pot is civil disobedience of the finest kind.
Absolutely. So,
and necessary.
when fighting prohibition, do you mean like donating to like activists, organizations?
Donating to like the Oregon Marijuana Initiative, donating to NORML. I became the 3rd non-attorney life member of National NORML in 1979 when I gave them $10,000.
Wow.
Which was a lot of money back then.
Mm-hmm.
It just, it seems so obvious to me, and I believe that we can get back there. There's a line, and usually when I'm on a podcast, I have to remind people of it. In Up in Smoke, Sergeant Stadenko, the narc that becomes a lizard, makes a speech about how marijuana is the last place that we see real free enterprise in America, and that's why they have to stop it. And I truly believe that there's more truth to that than people want to or are prepared to accept. We have to save cannabis from corporate commerce. I don't mind commerce in cannabis. I encourage it. But really, factory pot? What about all these people who are paying the mortgages? These are the people where my love is. These are, I want to see
Well,
it be normalized.
yeah, and here's the issue: is that like they're rejoining the rest of America, right? And it's
Yeah.
there's a lot that can be said about kind of like creating solidarity. Just realizing what a bum deal things are these days, and maybe try and do something to change it. But I want to go back to really quick. When you mentioned your friendships with Seattle Greg and the people at the hydro shop, it sounds like at that point you start getting exposed to like differentiated, genetics. Is that about right?
Well, see, I'm going in there, but it's not the people at the hydro shop. That's where I'm meeting or where I'm running into. My connections are bringing in just incredible cannabis, and so I'm wanting to grow it. This is better than what I've got. I'm always looking to grow better. So okay, that takes us back to I've got a pickup or not, I've got a U-Haul truck full of boxes of pot. I'm headed over there. My friend Mike Reeves says, "Yeah, bring it." I get over there and I've got, like I said, all these plants that I need to plant. I'm planting, and Mike was very kind. He let me plant on his 100 acres, make some patches, but he had some plants sitting right by his door of his trailer that he hadn't had time to plant. And here's, God, it must have been 36-inch long solid bud growing up out of a little tiny, like 1 gallon terracotta pot. The roots have grown down through the hole in the bottom of the pot into the ground. And what I'm seeing is one solid bud. This is my first conscious clue towards Sea of Green. Now, keep in mind I'd also seen Lawrence Cherniak's book, The Great Books of Hashish, Book 1, and it's got a picture of Lebanese hash fields. The Lebanese don't grow tall plants. They grow what I would call screens of green or plantlets. They're not growing big plants. But so this is in the back of my mind. I'm growing under lights, and I'm noticing that what I'm growing is really I'm harvesting the top 18 to 24 inches worth, and everything else is just, salvage. But I'm just trying to grow this. Then I learn about the inverse square law, that, twice the distance is 1/4 the intensity with light, twice the distance traveled, 1/4 the intensity at incident surface. And right then is when we have come up with the 7-foot kingdom, which is the umbrella-style paraboloid reflector made out of alclad that's 7 feet across. Now, the physics of this are that light which doesn't go up because it's headed down from bouncing off a reflector is now headed for your incident surface, where all the action is. Beyond that, it's also because these 7-footers came down to where the outer lip, the bottom of the lip of the reflector, was at the same point that the bottom of the bulb was, none of the light coming off of the lamp is lost. So the 7-foot reflector was a huge piece of why Sea of Green works. So I put a 7-footer over a 10 by 10, and we had developed some horizontal reflectors that sucked as horizontal reflectors, but were pretty good when you hug them upright, looking in from the corners. So I had 2,000 watts of light, 4 250 watt General Electric Corporation, which was England's General Electric Corporation, made what nowadays, except they don't make them anymore, would be a ceramic high pressure sodium lamp in terms of what came out of it. But I was referring to them in the book we put out in '85, Growing Indoors for Fun and Profit, as ultra high pressure sodiums, because that was basically why they worked as they did. And so from 2,000 watts, I grew 190 some plants in 6-inch pots, 6-inch round pots. And I got 3/4 of an ounce of bud off of each one. Now, I have to tell you, I didn't duplicate the results for another year, and I tried really, really hard. But all of a sudden, here was 2,000 watts, and I got 6.5 pounds of bud from it. And that was unprecedented. So I became an instant Sea of Green fan, although it still didn't have the name. It gets the name in '85, just before the book comes out. But so I do the first deliberate one in '83. I left the third part of how. So okay, there's the trip to northeastern Washington with the tall plants. The following summer, I'm doing a guerrilla thing down along Shill Shoal Drive, below Ballard, below Sunset Drive, on that long, like 5-mile long blackberry patch that runs between the bluff and the railroad. There's a blackberry patch like 100 feet across, and so that summer, I'm doing my Viet Cong thing with a set of hand clippers and backpack, hauling water and plants in, using clippers to do tunnels in, and then doing tunnels from one patch to another. And where I'm doing the patches, I cut the bottom of the blackberries and pull them in so that there aren't brown patches showing to anything that sees it from up above. There's just green from the plants. But I haul pots in, I haul dirt in, I haul plants in. But I don't get all my plants in down there. I've got a couple dozen plants that are sitting in 20-ounce solo cups in an upside-down pallet on top of a shed, on top of one of those houses, on that row of houses up on 63rd, across from what had been an elementary school and is now the Nordic Heritage Museum. The details are coming back to me as I think about it. So down below in that long patch, I've got, I'm there every day. But in the meanwhile, here's these couple dozen plants in 20-ounce solos, and Mary and John and I are watering them between us 2 or 3 times a day. And damned if I don't get 24-inch solid buds out of those. Now, this is 79, 80, 81. That was 81. It might have been 82. But so the next year, yeah, it was 82. So next year is when I start trying to do no, it was 81 because 82 is when I start trying to do deliberate Sea of Greens, and 83 is the first time that we mention it. We talk about the method in the column for The Farmer in the Sky in Cincinnati Tips, but we just mention it and it's not named yet. The name comes a couple years later. The book is going to the printer in a couple days. I'm in Steve Murphy's Indoor Sun on 45th talking to Herbie N., who was the connection to Steve Murphy for Neville, and Greg McAllister is a Hydrotech customer who I've met by then, and I'm describing Sea of Green. I'm describing what it looks like to Herbie N., and he says, wow, that sounds like it must look like like a sea of green. And picture angels that look like Cheech and Chong sounding horns and singing hallelujah, because at that moment the method got its name, Sea of Green. Single stem plants grown immediately adjacent, not intended to be anything more than one big ass flower and that's what you're after. You're not after any side branches, and you're growing them right next to the other. That's Sea of Green. I have explained the difference between Sea of Green and Plantlet, and Sea of Green and Screen of Green, and Screen of Green and Scrogging, Must be 100 times or more since then, including in writing a couple times. I mean, in printed writing a couple times. But
But what you've just invented
that was how that.
is the
Say again?
high plant count part is the problem.
Right, and they, now understand, they
For
don't
federal
change the plant count to. Yep. Federal sentencing guidelines prior to November 1st of 1987 made each plant 100 grams, regardless of actual weight. November 1st of 1987, the first, what they called, depending on if you're in prison or not, it is how you refer to these. It was new law. As of November 1st, 87, each plant for sentencing purposes became 1,000 grams. At that point, Sea of Green is, unless you're just a balls to the wall outlaw, not a really good idea. And I didn't know this until I was in prison. I didn't know about the sentencing guidelines until I'd been busted and was looking at 20 to life, having been indicted originally for 12,000 plus plants. So it was a little scary. That's also, by the way that true Screen of Green ends up being born. I'm sitting in the joint at Sheridan, Oregon, in late 1990 after pleading guilty and getting. I pled down to 3,999 plants with a stipulated date of offense prior to November 1st of 1987. So my plants went down to down to 100 grams per plant because of the stipulated date of offense, and the numbers went down to 39.99.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, it only matters when they bust in the door. But I was basically, that's a response to the guy who just put that comment up. The only counts when they bust down the door. Yeah, but I was walking around having painted a target on my own back. I was a columnist, a regular columnist in a purely cannabis magazine. I was the general manager of a company selling grow gear when they were unknown to me, conducting the biggest investigation of grow companies, grow stores ever. I was politically active and a major financial contributor to anti-prohibition activities. You couldn't have been much more of a target. Oh, and I was involved with a number of women. That was my modus operandi. I'd get involved with a woman and get her sitting on a grow, and then the crew would take care of stuff. But so there I am in the federal joint in '90, and thinking about how can I get the people out there same kind of yields that we were getting from Sea of Green, but the plant count is fucking scary. And I combine Sea of Green, plant bondage, the plantlet method, the mother method, into what is true Screen of Green, which is basically you grow a small plant, you trellis it small, so you're not having to spend a lot of time growing it out. You get it to where it's ready to be put, when you can put it in flower and reasonably expect some decent flowers to come off of it. That's Screen of Green, which is not a true Screen of Green, which is not the same as all trellising, which now all trellising is called scrogging. The word scrog was originally an acronym for Screen of Green, and now I differentiate between T-scrog, which is true Screen of Green, and general scrogging. But scrogging is now the single most commonly used method in commercial cultivation. Sea of Green runs a close second.
I wanted to make a comment about Sea of Green not being the safest thing as far as the legalities of it back in the day. But you did say that growing cannabis was a sign of protest. What did you say it was? Civil
Yes.
disobedience, right?
Civil
So
disobedience.
Sea of Green was just like an even bigger fuck you. Like, I'm gonna grow thousands of plants.
I honestly think that's how they took it. When we did Cincinnati Chips Magazine Sea of Green Memorial Show on the podcast that is eventually going to be reborn and come to Growers Network, which was the Farm in the Skies radio hour. I was fortunate enough that Ed Rosenthal, George Van Patten, in answer to BOEW, yeah, that's the investigation that put me away. I was indicted for the highest plant count of anyone indicted in phase one of Operation Green Merchant, 12,000 plus. I ended up doing a total of almost 16 years between my Sea of Green bust and something that arose from it when someone that owed me money laughed in my face after giving me stories for 9 years. That led to an unfortunate incident that cost me 9 more years. But that wouldn't have happened without Operation Green Merchant going down. Um,
What's
let's
crazy
see,
about
where
that
was
is
I?
they've given murderers and child abusers less time in prison than that.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, which leads to another story that I think I told you about when the judge wanted to know how I felt about all of this in my letter of remorse. Uh, um, a letter of remorse was like a confession. Like if you copped a plea, you were required to submit a letter of remorse in which you acknowledged your guilt. Now, I didn't feel bad about what I did, but I felt bad that I got busted. And one of the things about me is I'm not a good liar. So I try not to lie. When I lie, I get caught. That's just how it is. But I will tell the truth in a deceptive manner. I'm not going to say I don't. So I wrote the judge a letter that said, Your Honor, I recognize that the cornerstone of an orderly society is obedience to the law. I didn't mention that this was an Adolf Hitler quote. I left that part out. And I recognize that my behavior has damaged society by my failure to obey the law. But really, Your Honor, wouldn't society's purposes be better served if the bed I'm going to occupy in prison was occupied by a savings and loan swindler, a bank robber, or a child pornographer? And besides, I was growing those for my personal use. Now, in those days, if a judge was part of your plea bargaining conference, they were then bound by that conference. That's no longer true and hasn't been for about 20 years. But in those days, you could, in fact, if the judge was part of it, they were bound by it. So we got it bound, and I went ahead and I said, Your Honor, those were for personal use. And he said, Mr. Segal, I know that you're in my courtroom today pleading down to almost 4,000 plants, and I know where you started at. How can you possibly try to tell me that that many plants was for your personal use? And without breaking a smile, I looked at him and I said, Your Honor, I was using those plants to make money for myself. Never get snarky with a federal judge. Never. Especially not one that's about to sentence you. I got the maximum that I could within the range that was agreed to. I did not get time served taken off of it.
Because you were a smartass.
Because I was a smart ass and it needed to be said.
Yeah.
I don't know that
If
it
I
needed to
had the
be
chance
said
to,
there. It would have been better to say it here, like on the podcast. Like
Right, but
honestly, I mean,
it-
let me just put it to you this way, because I know civil disobedience, but like, for instance, let's say you would have gotten out of jail 5 years sooner. You could have talked to people about cannabis. It's a lot easier, you know. So like,
but
what had to happen at that point was you needed to shut your mouth, okay, so you can get as little time as possible, so you can get back, doing,
I'm sure Wolf has had these thoughts. Uh,
Oh,
yeah.
oh yeah, no doubt. But having had it happen and not having the ability to travel in time and go kick myself in the ass right before I do it, I'm glad it happened. I'm glad I said it. It needed saying, and I have gotten more laughs off of that story than almost any other anecdote I share because it's pretty silly. And
You own it. You
it was
own that.
true.
Yeah. It's amazing.
more
I
than
own
the
it. I did it. I did it myself. I have no one to blame but me.
Yeah. Well, if I could back us up to the part that
Yeah.
where you were farmer in the sky, and like, how
Yeah.
did that happen? Like, how did you hook up with Tom Alexander, and like, how did Sensimilla Tips get big?
Okay,
Was it a
Kevin
response to Hard
Bjornson, the
Times?
owner of Hydrotech, was the original farmer in the sky. One of the things that happened in the years prior to my becoming employed there, but almost from the very first time I walked into Hydrotech, Kevin and I had a great rapport. And I was able to understand what he was talking about. We shared some politics. We both tend to be very bookish people. Well, I used to be a bookish person before reading every day, all day in prison, or a lot of reading in prison. Um, and we hit it off really well. And he started reading me the next article before it would appear, and I started editing it. And the thing that really made it a huge thing for us is he also did some political writing as Esperanza Godot, and he did a review of the Anarchist Cookbook, pointing out all the errata in the original edition and pointing out uh, how it would lead to explosions. And I pointed out, dude, you need to make people aware. Start out with a disclaimer before you do anything else in this thing. This is strictly for information, not to be acted on. This is only for information and education purposes. Okay, well, then we're doing that. But then the next issue he comes up with, if someone's at your door and they say they're the police with a warrant, hold them at bay with a gun until they show you the warrant. Think about that for a second. A cop knocks on your door and you have a gun in your hand.
Yeah, that doesn't sound like good advice.
What's going to happen?
They would probably shoot you today.
No. Well, I stopped and did that, and at that point,
They don't like that.
they
too
would have
much.
shot you then. If I was a cop and you come to the door with a gun, I'm going to shoot you because I'm a cop and you're at the door with a gun. I mean, that's realistic. I wouldn't blame them.
Who's this Kevin
But
guy?
in the course of our discussion of that, Kevin Bjornson, the owner of Hydrotech, now Seattle Hydroponics, and not even in Seattle anymore. But Kevin and I hit it off well enough, and I was able, because I'd been growing at that point for 14 years, or 12 years. I was able to rein in some of the things that he wanted to say or was inclined to say, or that I knew was he had listened to someone and they were bullshitting and I knew it wasn't true. But it also, what I loved about it was I was able to share experiments, and it was the farmer in the sky, not me. Oh, one of the things Kevin and I had in common is we both love Robert Heinlein, the science fiction author, who wrote a book called The Farmer in the Sky, which was about terraforming Jupiter's moon Ganymede.
Okay.
Right, so that's where the farmer in the sky came from, right? It was about technological growing. It was about growing under lights. It was about growing with hydro. It was about growing with CO2. It was about terraforming your room, terraforming your basement, if you will. And so that's where the farmer in the sky came from. And then my association with Kevin, it got to where, we'd sit there and I was doing experiments. Other people were doing experiments. Kevin and I would update the stuff, get it into credible form to put in the magazine, and then eventually in '85, on June 1st of 1985, a week after the book came out, or it might be a week later, Growing Indoors for Fun and Profit came out, and that's the first place that Sea of Green gets attached to a method, or gets attached to what previously had been a variation of the mother plant method. Mother plants were, of course, taking clones off your moms and getting them ready, and so you don't have to worry about what is this strange plant out of the bag going to be. Oh yeah, all these cuts come from moms. My moms right now, I have to take a minimum of 144 clones per month off them, or they're too crowded. I have to keep them cut back. Moms taking care properly. You can do a thousand clone thing off of 4 or 5 moms very easily. Answering whoever was asking that.
What was the first plant that you mommed?
God, it would be so convenient to say Northern Lights, but I don't think it was. I think it was a G13 that supposedly had come from the UW campus. G13 became a regular when I came down. When I came down from Portland, I brought a G13 with me. That G13 got crossed with another kind that I am sure came from Seattle as well, called UW. Or no, wait, was it UW? Okay, G13 UW. God, there's another one that's in there. Okay, the G13. Okay, there it is. The G13 came down, got crossed, as I understand it, with the Super Silver Haze, and that offspring was the UW.
Do you want to tell the
And I will
people
say
about
now,
how the University of Washington was involved in weed being grown on it?
well, I can tell them this. I can tell them the story, but I've heard this same story about G13 having come from the Parchment Plantation, the University of Mississippi's only authorized cannabis grow in America. Uh, I've heard that it came from an herb garden that was being done in Berkeley at the University of California. Yeah, the UW hash plant that supposedly came from there. Dominic, you're from the academic world. Is there anyone in the academic world that doesn't survive on publishing papers?
Yeah, people at teaching universities, R2s, they don't publish much. They just
Okay,
teach.
okay. Supposedly, G13 came from the University of Washington's medicinal herb garden. Now, the last article about cannabis that came from the UW was in 19, at least from anything associated with ag, in 1963. So, where was this G13 being grown? This secret garden that everyone knows about, but no one knows any details about?
Well, there was a
I'm inclined to
greenhouse.
disbelieve that it came from there. There was a greenhouse, but there was no medicinal herb thing going on there that I know of, or at least none with cannabis. No papers came out from there about cannabis. Last one, 63.
Yeah, but I mean, like, it didn't have to be weed from the UW Research Garden as well. It could have been,
Right.
students who,
Right. Well, I mean,
got it.
it's okay, but at that point, the story of it having been government weed, right, being grown by the
Yeah,
university, which is the story that
yeah,
I hear from different universities. That's the story I'm disbelieving. But it came from students at UW. Bob Thumler is who walked in, and his last name was Thumler. We all called him Thumler. Is who walked in and told, as I understand it, told Steve Murphy, "Why are you using fluorescent lights? Don't you know how good HIDs are for growing under?" You're directly in touch with him, I guess, Dominic. Ask him if that story is true. With
with
an
who?
engineering student from Steve Murphy,
Oh,
a guy
well, I'm
named
not
Bob
directly in touch
Thumb.
with him now, and he's in like
Oh,
Fiji, and
is
he
he?
was barely coherent when I knew him 12 years ago.
Oh, okay.
He's a
His
big
son
drinker.
still runs the company, I know, but
Yes, his son absolutely runs Indoor Sun Shop. It's in Fremont, and it's one of the few that
yeah,
hasn't shut down, I think.
yep. Well, because they always had their feet very. They 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 didn't. They weren't pretending about being primarily a gardening shop that sold houseplants. I
Yeah,
mean, yes, they did a lot of other business, but you walk in, you've got 30 or 40 different kinds of plants present in
houseplant.
commercially
Oh yeah,
sellable quantities. It's a lot more credible than the only thing you've got is one house plant and a sign that says not for illegal purposes, don't even ask.
right. Oh, somebody's got an interesting smuggled out of UW. Wow, the grower family that got it smuggled out of the UW. I mean, like,
Uh,
I don't know if it would have been
I
a
would
much
like to
of a
know.
smuggling operation. It's like, but yeah, yeah, maybe if it's being kept under lock and key.
Yeah, I mean, See, I don't know who.
I mean,
Okay, that
Neville has a
was from
story of
to go to.
Go
of
ahead,
I
Notso.
think it was through Jorge Cervantes. He came out at some point and bought a couple of clones, one of which was the G13 from people in Oregon, you know. Um, and I've heard that the G13 is different. I've heard that the G13 and the UW are two different names from the same thing from different crews. And you're right, just because somebody wasn't writing a paper on it didn't mean that there wasn't some like entrepreneurial like PhD students or something like that were trying to like pull something off back then either. I mean, one of the things I think is
Yeah.
cool about a lot of these stories is like when you get back, no matter if you're talking to the people that are directly involved or not, there's always like an era of mystery or like like it could have been this, but it could have been that, but it could have been this like choose your own adventure type stuff. Like it's plausible, but it's rarely like this to this to this to this to this.
The,
I don't know.
the thing is, we've got marker assisted selection now, or marker assisted genomics. There's no real reason that in a world where cannabis was normalized, where we didn't have the stupid framework around it that cages in all kinds of great research, we could sit there and pretty much go back and forensically determine this came from this and this came from this and this came from this and these groups came off of these groups. We have the tools out there. We just don't have the resources, the legal framework that allows that to be
No,
done, but there's no
it's
reason it
mostly
shouldn't
resources,
eventually.
not legal framework. Totally is easy to do genomics research with just DNA. Um, like I remember uh, when John Page was out collecting genetics for his biopiracy adventure. Uh, like a leaf cutting, like was not illegal. Basically, it was like a DNA sample. So like he was able to take it across the border back up to Canada. But resources, is the thing. You have to have a lot of money in grants to get this kind of work done.
I'd like to see Paul Delord finance it.
What? Who is he?
Paul Delord, Sensible Seeds out of UK. He's
Okay.
he's he is the closest there is to producing multiple lineages of commercial ag stable phenotypic expression in high THC cannabis.
Okay.
And he's got the UK's licenses. He's got all the home office licenses for everywhere.
No. No.
I mean, I will say like in ag and stuff. I mean, like what Dominic is doing right now, you're trying to sort of like catalog like the social and like the like connections and how cannabis moved around and the peoples involved and the types of peoples involved.
Hmm.
But like and that's important. Almost all other valuable crops though have had decades of like farmer and like PhD students and professors working towards making the corn faster, more viable, or high sugar whatever it might be. Cannabis has sort of been bred in closets and garages and hillsides and
Hmm.
completely separated. And so I almost feel like what Dominic is doing right now is sort of like it's one of the bridges of
That's
like
good. Yeah.
bringing this thing that like millions and millions and millions of Americans have consumed and grown, and there's this entire culture that got created,
Yeah.
and it really wasn't documented very well.
No,
You
I mean
know?
it has no voice, in policy discussions, because to policymakers, like you're all a bunch of people with cannabis use disorder, you know, that's it. Like but like it's a whole culture that's just by default labeled as a public health problem, and instead, this
Well,
fight is, like no, this is a culture.
Yeah, I mean, and it's also I
you know,
also
and
found it interesting too, like you know, it was, I'm going to lose my train of thought. I just wanted to throw out there that I think it's really funny that scrog could have been called plant bondage. It didn't end up settling on that, but an early name for scrog
It's plant
was
bondage.
that
Actually, that was
plant
LSD.
bondage. And I also would
That
say
was
too that
LSD. Was plant bondage.
even to this day, that method remains like an extremely efficient method for growing, material in small spaces and stuff like that, and getting quite a bit from because there's all different ways to measure yield. It's like yield per watt or yield per square foot. Like there's different parameters that
With
people. But sea of green, because it minimizes veg time, and one comment I should make is that I've found that genetically, not all plants, but a lot of plants only make a certain amount of resin. And so if you grow a very small plant, like a quarter ounce or a half ounce or just a couple ounces, it might be nicer herb than that plant grown giant, where the plant has to put an enormous amount of energy into stalk and stem and structure and all these different things. And there's way more wheat, there's way more bud all over it. And I'm not saying it won't be good, but I've just found that tiny things tend to be really good because the plant focuses its energy on the actual, whatever terpenes, flower, resin, whatever, however you want to describe it. And so I just wanted to throw that out
in
there,
that,
that method remains viable, 42 years later or something like that. It's not been, I don't really think it's still one of the more efficient methods of doing so. And now that things are going legal and stuff like that, the main knock against it was everyone was talking about, well, the legal implications having nothing to do with the quality of the plant or how efficient it was or anything like that. It was like how much trouble you could get in for doing
You
it.
still get into a lot of trouble.
Yeah, but I just mean that
In some
but,
places.
well, and then there's also legal and traditional and all that
But
other
I
kind
mean,
of stuff
think
too.
of this:
So
if you're a home grower with a tent, you're not going to get in trouble for doing a sea of green. I mean, I'm talking about in California.
most places.
You know,
Yeah.
in California. I mean, I don't want to speak.
If you're
First of
in
all,
your
we're not
dorm,
giving legal advice. Well,
sure.
I mean, the other
you
part
can
of it
get
that we
thrown
should
out of the
say is
dorm for
that,
doing a lot of things.
well, culturally, and this is maybe important too, because Dominic likes to do a lot of culture stuff. Culturally now, it's so much more accepted that I think that like prosecutors and the cops are easier on people to some degree, where in the 80s or 90s, early 90s, where he was discussing his struggles, they kind of viewed it like you were selling heroin or something like that. Like
Worse.
it was viewed very severely,
Yeah.
and people needed to be made an example of, and people needed to be punished, and all that different types of stuff. And so,
That's
culture.
something this generation does not understand instinctively. They've grown up with it being in California and on the West Coast for sure.
I mean, I remember talking a number of years ago to, um, people call him Seattle Greg, right? And he told me that literally everyone he knew got busted.
Yeah.
It was just a rolling series of people were really persecuted and that type of thing. And I think that persecution led to social, he was Wolf was saying about all the countercultural stuff and thumbing your, flicking off the man and all that type of thing, because it was it was severe. It was almost like they saw herb as a way to punish groups of Americans they didn't like, because the
Well,
people that used it were not, they didn't view as on their team.
it was literally like that. The hippies were hated. By Ronald Reagan in particular, right, or Richard Nixon. But then later on, they were hated by plenty of liberals and Democrats as well.
I mean, I
Joe
think that
Biden,
it was
Joe Biden
in
was the
this,
author of those sentencing guidelines that got Wolf locked
the
up.
the 70s seemed pretty freewheeling, mostly because people didn't know what they were looking for the most part. And then it seems like the 80s, especially as it got later in the 80s and the 90s, was a time of intense persecution where
Yep.
they really ramped up trying to
100%.
stomp it out, you
It
know?
really shifts.
Yeah,
It really
the
shifted
zero
what's
tolerance
going on.
policy.
What's that, Wolf?
I said, yeah, the zero tolerance policy.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
just zero. Yeah, and just making examples of people, and the whole concept of mandatory minimums where plant counts were like specific penalty lines type of
Yeah.
thing, and all that type of mess. And so it just like, I don't know, it's yeah, that part,
It
most
always.
people involved got in trouble. Operation Green Merchant, it almost seems like little communities around grow shops happened
Mhm.
because they, like he said, they would be in line and they would be making friends with the people in line, and Wolf would be selling gear and stuff like that. And so, when they did the nationwide raids and stuff like that, they really smashed a lot of pockets.
I mean, it was a smart strategy by them. Like grocery stores are absolutely hubs where things were organized. And information was shared. I mean, it's really that mid to late '80s, period in particular, where like just a whole chain of people gets displaced one way or the other,
Yeah.
and it shifts the genetics to Amsterdam, for one.
Yeah, Greg told me that if they hadn't given the seeds to Europe, they would be
Yeah,
lost because every single person he knew back home got in trouble
yeah,
in a rolling series of busts in the late 80s and through the 90s, and some people multiple times.
yeah.
And so that's a big part of it too. Like, I don't think Amsterdam would have been what it was without all the persecution,
Not at
because
all.
almost everyone that went over there was fleeing it in some
Absolutely.
fashion,
Directly fleeing it.
Yeah,
Not even just sort of like
you
maybe.
know?
Yeah,
those who
yeah,
could.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, some people like you
There's
ended
something
up,
I want
in prison for significant.
I want to jump in for a second. You were talking about early in the plant.
Yeah.
In Nexo, in I don't know if they're in Germany or Holland, but in Nexo, the company is putting out a paper. It's a three-part paper that talks about no veg methods, right? Because there are a number of different no veg methods, but honestly, and I mean, I got in an argument over on LinkedIn about this. Someone tried to say, well, yeah, people were doing all kinds of no veg cannabis methods before 1983 when you first wrote about it, and um, whether or not they did, read the paper that Inexo put out because it talks about what's going on inside the plant in the first couple of weeks after it germinates or after you've got a clone, and it talks about the way in which you set the genetic programming, the epigenetic programming that determines growth rate, resistance to UV. A lot of that is still pretty fluid in the first couple weeks, so that there's a lot of good reason for doing sea of green type, just really fast, straight flower from seed. If you've got stable seed, stability, agricultural industry level stability is what you need if you're going to be doing hundreds and hundreds and hundreds or thousands and thousands and thousands. Um, Hydrotech, like you talk about the colleges. By the time that I got taken down in Green Merchant, I had two Gladwell's worth of combined experience, education, research, and innovation. A Gladwell is 10,000 hours of those things combined.
Okay.
I didn't need college. I don't need letters after my name. There's a lot of basics I miss because I didn't have that college background, but there's come to be this attitude in the cannabis industry where they talk about bro science, missing that 95% of what is currently used in cannabis came from a bro scientist figuring something out. And
Well, yeah,
academic science
I've said it before.
has become
It's
almost a
observational
religion.
science.
Well, citizen
Yeah.
scientist is
But
the term. There's like a term, citizen scientist. that applies.
Yeah. Well, I'm more comfortable with that, but I see bro scientist a lot.
Yeah, well, it's, denigrating for people. One thing
Yes.
before we get to like, how did you get to meet Tom Alexander?
Okay, because Kevin, that's part of this. Kevin was already writing as the Farmer in the Sky when the first Farmer in the Sky article wasn't even called the Farmer in the Sky. It was in the spring '82 edition. For the next 7 years, seven? No, the next
Sinsemia
6 years,
tips.
there was a
Sinsemia tips. Let's
yes
remember the audience doesn't
of
necessarily
Cincinnati
remember.
tips.
Yep. Which was based out
Oh,
of.
okay. I'm sorry. Since for anyone that didn't know this, Cincinnati Tips: Domestic Growers Journal is a magazine that was put out by Tom Alexander, owner of Full Moon or Full Harvest, Harvest Moon Publishing, and Harvest Moon a Grow Shop in Corvallis, Oregon. That magazine was the online forum before there was an online. If you, I mean, High Times, I don't want to say anything bad about High Times, although I could. It changed a lot from what Tom foresaw, who was an outlaw smuggler that put up the money to do a parody of Playboy for one issue that became the ongoing High Times. When Green Merchant happened, High Times, Cincinnati Tips, and Neville were the three top priorities. Hydrotech was the fourth because most of state of the art in grow equipment and new techniques was coming out of Hydrotech from Kevin and I. And in large measure, I'm a high functioning autist. My IQ is stupidly off the charts, and I'm obsessed with cannabis. And I'm an experimental type. That's why that happened. Okay? They came after us hard. They came after a lot of grow shops, but really, once you got down below us, it was if you had been stupid enough to say the wrong things, you would get busted. They actively, I mean, it took them 2 or 3 months to get a customer to where we'd even talk, for us to talk to one of their people who was undercover as a customer
So to
about
make sure
cannabis.
people
And
know
even
what
then,
we're
we had them
talking about,
sign a statement.
people,
Right. Okay.
people,
Cincinnati
you know,
Tips Magazine
back in
and
the
Green Merchant,
day,
Operation Green Merchant, and back in the day when there was no online forum, there was a
well,
magazine called
I,
Cincinnati Tips.
yeah, and I was gonna say when there was, no
Cincinnati Tips
Amazon,
was everything
people
High
used to
Times
buy
wanted to be.
people used to buy everything at the grocery stores.
Yeah.
And you're
Yes.
talking about the cops coming into your grocery stores and trying to get you to tell them about talking how to grow weed so that they could bust you.
And a number right. And if you did, then they would bust you or try to bust you and get you to cooperate with them in keeping track of who had been to your shop. And I will say this because this is important as it affects me. I was in prison when Kevin Bjornson did in fact pretend to cooperate with the DEA. Not a single license number that he gave them did not have 2 or 3 improper phony numbers in it. So you people who hate Kevin for that, because that also touches on the legend of the farmer in the sky, that was Kevin, but Kevin did not actually cooperate. He got over on them. He only got 3 years. Of course, he didn't have the kind of spread that I had. um, I mean, they busted people that were associated with me in Arizona, California, Oregon, Alaska. They insisted on calling my little operation a multi-state network of extremely sophisticated indoor grow operations. Come on, hydroponics and lights is not that sophisticated. But most of what is current state of the art, most of what is current state of the art in growing cannabis, other than the genetics, which even there is just recombinations of existing genetics, the first article, the first public speculation about the use of LEDs in agriculture, never mind in growing cannabis, appeared in Cincinnati Tips in the Farmer in the Sky column. The first time that what's now called aquaculture gets written about in a magazine, specifically in combination with cannabis, it's written about as organic hydroponics in Cincinnati Tips. It was actually the Farmer in the Sky column. Just on the hard flip. This is a fun one. You know that thing about 3 days of dark right before harvest? I would bet money that that's someone getting wrong the hard flip, which was a 24 to 36 hour dark in between your long days and your short days to bring on faster and harder onset of what we then called fluorogens and now know as the balance of phytochrome red and phytochrome far red. State of the art was coming out of there. That's why we were number 4. But all of what is current state of the art, let's see, double-ended sodiums. Okay, there were already double-ended lights that were high intensity discharge. High energy induction lighting was invented by Nikola Tesla. It is the next major breakthrough in lighting for growing under. Watch.
Hey, and when Wolf says this, he says this from a place of extreme study on the subject. A lot of you who are listening now are thinking like, oh, this OG's got some stories from the 70s, but he still actively is doing so much research on different lighting. He's, some people will tell you that he is an expert, and then, the people that have something to benefit by him being wrong will try to discredit him. But the bottom line is he's studied lighting and you don't actually sell lights or anything like that. You don't have any skin in the game.
I am not commercially associated with any lighting manufacturer. I have companies that I like or dislike because of what they do. The Farmer in the Sky occasionally will give a company permission to say that they have the Farmer in the Sky's walrus of approval because it means I love their service, I love their product. You can't buy it, it's given. Lighting, there's stuff that we need to advance our state of knowledge. Science isn't religion. Anytime someone does what they say is science to prove something, they're not doing science. Science is done as studies to determine the validity of a hypothesis, not to prove you were right about something. Bending over backwards to avoid confirmation bias. If you believe something, you have to be really, really careful not to let that you believe it influence what your results when you're doing testing are. And that I see happening. And I see scientists making claims that just offend my sense of propriety. And I don't mind calling out their names. And when I call out their names, a lot of them have fans. They don't like that. I don't have a problem with being unpopular for telling the truth. Well, I do. But I'm willing to because I'm not going to stop telling the truth about the equipment and the people who push certain things. The next time you read Bruce Bugby talk about far red, go read about Emerson and what he was doing and the Emerson effect, which was discovered in the late 50s. When Inexo writes about no veg as being something new, it's not something new, but they have done a better study of the benefits of it than anyone else out there. I'm willing to tolerate their misdirection as to how new or not new veg techniques are because the information that they're coming up with is so good, the real information about the benefits. I'll forgive a scientist a lot of things as long as what they do is tell the truth and as long as they recognize that even if their experiments are borne out, like you have a theory and this theory You test it with experiment, and you test it with experiment, and you test it with experiment, and it keeps proving out. That doesn't mean it's necessarily the whole picture. And here, I mean, we're talking about light. Photosynthetically active radiation is wide from 400 to now they've jacked it up to 800 nanometers in wavelength. But here's a question for you. Why? Why would infrared, beyond red, go from being 750 to 800? The wavelengths didn't change, or the colors didn't change. Did the measurements change? Maybe. But what we know now is that there's a lot of phytochemical reactions going on that are driven by other than PAR, as a result of which the American Society of Agricultural and Biological Engineers 2 years ago, roughly 9 years after I started advocating for an almost identical scale, finally put out Standard 640. Standard 640 is plant biologically active radiation and goes from the low end, they still call it the high end, of 800 to the high end, which they call the low end, of 280 nanometers in wavelength. The reason I'm calling it the way I do, infrared, infra is Latin for below. There's lower frequency
Wolf?
makes longer wavelengths. Yes. I'm sorry. You see, I'm on a
No,
rant.
Hold
I
on.
really?
apologize.
I think
Good.
we
It's
I
like-
think we
Well,
proved I think we proved
like-
that Wolf knows a little something about
when
lighting.
when
We'll
they
do
play the
another show where we
didgeridoo,
talk about just how knowledgeable Wolf is on lighting. But yeah, you know what happened, Wolf? We all got really high before this conversation.
Oh, I mean,
You know what I mean? Like we all fucking like smoked a big for Riley, and now you're just getting like deep
Yeah.
into like the
I'm
far red.
I'm
Hang on.
very chatty, but
Hey,
even I need to take a breath every now and again. And Wolf has an ability to just
Scotty couldn't
talk without
It was such
new
a
breath
fun opening.
just-
That was like, I just got
yeah
like,
about very technical subjects. I'm not making fun of you at all, Wolf. It was actually
A
amazing.
little
I just-
bit. No.
but,
Hey,
you know,
like we
I
make fun of
accept
him because he's our friend and we love him, but this is who he is, you know? Like I
But, I
opened
mean-
up the door, I said something about Wolf knows a little something about lighting, and he went
okay, so
Tries-
I can say
understand. This is my obsession. This is my obsession.
as somebody
I'm a
who's
pot
been growing
geek and
indoor
lighting
for
freak.
clearly.
30 some years, right? Which is not as long as he has, but it's a pretty long time. And I've grown all kinds of lights, and I've been blessed enough to have similar strains that I've held for a long time that I've seen grow. And sometimes you would be shocked at how much just changing nothing but the spectrum that the plant is growing under can induce it to express differently. More resin, less resin, bigger buds, leafy, like just lots of different looks. And some things have less of that in them. There's less of a variance on how they come out. And some things that can look like a completely different plant. So there is validity in what he was saying, for sure. Just bro science wise, observationally, you know. I also wanted to say just one thing on this
This is
podcast
established
before it gets lost.
This-
I wish we had a picture of your lawyer's face as you told the judge off and you admitted to selling most of it for cash, because he had probably cut this deal and had worked this thing out and it was all right there, and then he just watched his client just nuke it from orbit and he was like, oh my god,
But the judge
you
was
know.
bound. In those days, the only reason I could do it was because the judge in those days was bound by what had been agreed to in the plea bargaining
Oh.
agreement. Nowadays, they can ignore it. I would not
Yeah.
have done that if they weren't bound to it, because I mean I knew they
That makes
probably weren't
sense.
going to like it. I just, yeah, you know. But I have to do this. This is so important to me. It's not just a matter of growth science. It's that, like the current Nobel Prize winning model of photosynthesis, is that it is a capacitatively sequential process. In other words, a charge builds to a capacity, then discharges, and that's the sequence. Photons come in, 8 to 10 photons come in, that releases an electron. When 8 to 10 electrons are released, you get a photosynthetic incident. Well, the problem with that is that there's a tail, the constructive interference, something we know about from radio. There's a tail that the head of the next bit of flicker overlaps with, so that when your light is flickering fast enough, which of artificial light sources only high energy induction does, those otherwise separated bits of signal are now unbroken signal, so no energy gets spent overcoming inertia. Yet the current view of photosynthesis is upheld by experimentation that is not done with solar levels at solar relative percentages of the different wavelengths.
Hey, Wolf.
So good science,
Wolf.
solid science. Yes,
Hey, Wolf.
I did it again, didn't I?
No, you did it again.
Sorry.
And what's funny is, I'm
provoked him.
almost and I'm gonna actually poke the bear again. I can't fucking help it.
Okay.
But like, because that was just, it's technical, right? But on the
Right.
last podcast, you described light like music, right? Or
Yes.
like sound waves. Okay. And why don't you
Right.
just
And
briefly
because waves-
use that? Right. Go ahead.
Okay. Wave theory is the branch of quantum mechanics that has a set of the laws of physics that govern how waves are created, how they act, how they react, how they interact. When the peaks of a wave arrive at the same time, or when the peaks of multiple waves arrive at the same time, even if they're not the same frequency, the amount of time that availability is there is extended. In music, going to music, it's the difference between a single note, let's call it a C note, which is, if I remember correctly, C, G, and D. The chord, the duration of the chord is longer than the period of the duration of resonance when that note's still hanging in the air of any of the individual notes. Light waves work the same way. When the peaks of the waves arrive at the same time, which is referred to as improper phase coherence, the total amount of time that combined signal lasts and is available to the plants is longer. So instead of energy that you're putting in to the transmission process being used to regain signal integrity, to regain that broken signal, it's a continuous signal, so you get higher quantum yield efficacy. Quantum yield efficacy is that percentage of the energy hitting the lights or hitting the plants that is actually utilized, not just potentially utilized, but actually utilized to drive biological activity.
Drive the bus. Hey, I'm gonna stop
Drive
you
the
there
bus.
on
Thank
that.
you.
But my point is, I think I'm proving the fact that Wolf needs to have his own show, because he's got a lot to say, a lot to share, and I mean, like I said, I think there's only so much we can absorb on the dabs and joints that we had prior to this podcast. So I don't want to go too much into the light tech. But like you said, this is who Wolf is. And if we didn't spend 10 or 15 minutes getting our brains exploded by his knowledge of light, then this story wouldn't be complete. So we allowed that to happen for a moment, Wolf.
I mean, from my
Okay.
perspective, the
Someone
interesting
else is
part to
poking
me,
the bear.
I don't want to poke the bear, but I just want to say that, like, I mean, like, as far as light goes, like, we have a ball of light in the sky, and like all plants learned, they grew up under that light, right? And so most indoor lights are like an
Yes.
approximation. They're narrower. They don't have the complete spectrum. I don't really think I can't even remember the inverse law or whatever, where like the light from the sun has already gone 93 million miles to get here, so like an extra few is not really that big of a deal. But most indoor lighting is trying to figure out how to approximate the sun, and then
Yes.
and how to get plants to respond, right? Because really to me,
Right.
the goal is always better weed. So how can I use food or environment
Yes.
or lighting or what have you to get better herb? The sun makes it easy because I don't think any humans have made a light as good as the sun. But you can't control nature.
Actually, actually, we at this point, I can pretty much give you any combination of altitude and latitude on Earth as far as natural light goes, with a high energy induction light and the solar cure UV lights. With that,
Okay,
I can give you the full range of plant biologically active radiation from 800 to 280.
so in layman's terms, then I have a question
Yes.
because I've thought about this a bunch. Because obviously, like, say, like the light going to Colombia, because it's on the equator, it'll be a shorter distance. It goes through less atmosphere. It's higher in the sky. It's more blue, right? Where something grown like
Yes.
farther away, like in
It's,
Afghanistan or
it's
something
also
like that,
higher above the ground.
and so if that's farther away, it's going to be
Okay, but
going
what you
through
said
more
was incomplete.
atmosphere,
It's also higher altitude. Yes,
and
which
so
means that it's
so
going to bounce off of more particles and moisture, so the light is going to be different.
so do you think
Every
that we
place
might
on
need
Earth has.
different types of light to grow different types of plants, like within cannabis? Like,
As
should Afghans get a certain kind of light, where like something that's far more equatorial might want to get a different blend? Do you think that's accurate?
I think that yes, as a matter of fact, I think that what we want to do, and interestingly enough, unless Trump's budget cuts have killed it, for a while there uh, you could go online to the National Oceanographic and what the atmospheric and anyway NOAA, NOAA, and you could find out what the average spectral blend hitting the ground at any given combination of latitude and altitude on Earth was.
That
And
is pretty cool.
with that you could then set your lights so that they would in fact be as close to natural sunlight as natural sunlight. Now, some of the things that are going to be missing are non-light, but in terms of light that drives phytochemical reactions, that's 800 to 280. That's why Asabi adopted that as plant biologically active radiation, standard 640, because that's what does it. It's darn it. I'm trying to find. There's something here. I'll get a chance to read it to you eventually, Gaby. It's a page out of Drake's book that 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 reading it that day that I did my vision quest is why I'm a lighting freak, because I experienced the quantum leap. It was so vividly real. The description was so good, and it ends with a warning. If you're going to read, if you're going to become heavily involved in light, understand just how important what you're doing is. And so that's sort of the way I've ended up going.
Can I ask quickly about the Kalgani hash plant? You said there were like the purple one, non-purple one. Did it come as like a seed population? And was that the first time you saw a plant called like hash plant, like introduction to broadleaf?
Yes, it was. And my friend Frank down by Kent had this really good California connection. Uh, and this is like since the book Sinsemilla had just come out, and first I was getting Sinsemilla from him, and then Hawaiian was around at the same time. It had been around earlier, and my mom had brought me that big ass bud of Kona Gold, and it set the standard for when someone calls pot gold. If it doesn't look like an almost ripe banana, it's yellow. But it Frank got this Calgany hash bud. Uh, he got some Mazari Sharif. He got a number of kinds from down there. He was hooked up with the Zudman, which is a cycle club, third largest 1% club on earth. Um, but they were apparently very well hooked up because that was where I got it. And I remember being amazed because when I rolled it up, the first stuff, the Mazari Sharif, when I rolled it up, it tasted like I was smoking a pipe of hash. So that was a hash making type plant, but it wasn't a hash plant. The Calgany hash bud came a little later. It was probably more around 79, 80 rather than 76, 77. But yeah. Hot knife hits, you got it right. Although the tie was at the same time as the Mex for some people. Not as much, but it was there. I had golden Columbia, but the yellow was always half dead. That's to Frank Frank Barbera. I'm sorry. I can't avoid reading those things. Um, did I
It's okay.
did I answer that sufficiently? No, because there was we first started getting hash plants from down there, and or plants that were of hash varieties and indicas. And for a while there, I couldn't have told you what's the difference between a skunk, an indica, and an Afghani. And honestly, I still am not really, you know, I the double Capricorn, obsessive compulsive, wants it to be really clear cut. Would really like to get everything to the point where it's genetically marked, so or not genetically marked, but at least sequenced, and every package should have all, or at least the top 10 cannabinoids, the top 10 terps, the top 10 flavonoids available where you go to the package, you scan it, that takes you to the database. Here's what's in it. And that ties in with, did I ever tell you about my research collaborative idea, Dominic? Because we have a big problem with
Probably.
ensemble, with ensemble cannabis
When
testing
was it?
versus isomolecular.
When?
This would have been back John Wayne Smith right around then. Because
Sam Wayne
my
Smith.
idea when I was John Wayne, did I just say I
Sam.
did say Wayne,
It was
didn't I?
Sam.
Sam Wayne. Okay, sorry, Sam Wayne Smith. Um, the idea
I hear
is
John Wayne
basically
growing.
that no, actually, it was a little later than it was. I went down to Puerto Rico to sell some lights, and for a company that I was helping design lights for, and at about the same time is when the DEA asked for proposals for producing cannabis for research purposes, for applications to produce cannabis for research purposes. That would make it about 16, I think, either 15 or 16. And I got this idea while I was down there, and I'm really, really, really well connected in Puerto Rico. My family, well, my grandfather is considered as having started to as having started the movement to save Old San Juan. So when I'm down there, I get second day I'm down there, I get a call from the desk at my hotel. Senor Segal, there's someone who wishes to speak to you. And I told you this story last time, I think. And for me, when I get a call like that, it means there's either a cop or some guy's pissed at me because I've been fooling with his old lady. Either way, I'm out the window or the back door.
Why?
Except I'm on
Because
the 39th
both
floor.
of
There's
those
no
are a
window. There's no
possibility.
back door. That's pretty much. Both of those seem reasonably possible. So I go downstairs, and here's a chauffeur in like a classic chauffeur outfit. And that classic chauffeur outfit, he says to me, LaDoña wishes you to join her for lunch. And now I know enough about Puerto Rican high society to know that the social elite in Puerto Rico are mainly German Puerto Ricans from the wave of Germans who came over right around the turn of the 19th century. And LaDoña is the little, very small woman who basically is the queen of Puerto Rico when you get into that society. And my auntie Sarah happened to be one of her favorite people on earth, and so she wanted to meet me because the last time she'd seen me, I was 3 or 4 years old. So I say, well, when? And he says, now. I say to the chauffeur, when? He says, now. And so I go, I have lunch with her, and on the way to having lunch with her, I'm thinking about the DEA thing, and I realized there's got to be some way that this could work through the university. So one of the things I asked at lunch was, could she introduce me to someone who could maybe help me in terms of understanding Puerto Rico's medical cannabis industry and where it might be headed. The next day, I had lunch with the governor's executive assistant, the head of the Puerto Rico Industrial Development Council, and the heads of the law, ag, and med schools of the University of Puerto Rico. Okay, so now, yeah, they'd be interested in something. What do I have to propose? And of course, at this point, I don't have anything really to propose, so I'm starting to try to figure something out. I get back up to Portland, and I figured the easiest thing I can do to try to figure out what I can or can't do is I'm going to call. I happen to know that the diversion division at the DEA is who does this shit, does issues licenses to do research on controlled substances. And for the next 2 weeks, I spend about an hour a day on the phone with Section Chiefs Booth, now head of the diversion division, and Armstrong. And I'm asking them questions like, well, if I did this, this, and this, would that possibly get the license? No. Well, how about if I did this, this, and this? No. How about this? No. This goes on for about an hour a day for 3 weeks. And I mean, I got no problem. I know they know who I am. I joke about it with them. Yeah, you guys should have. I wish you guys had been in business a few years back and would have had much happier dealings with the DEA than I did. But, eventually they say, I ask, well, how about if I do this and then did that and did this and did that? And they say, well, I don't. You'd have to ask the FDA about that. And my thinking is, I've been talking to them for 2 weeks about stuff, figuring out how to do a research thing. And now they're sending me to the FDA. Either they've been jacking me around for 2 weeks just seeing what I would say, or they're just, they've had their fun, or they can't say, yes, that could work because they're not allowed to do that. But they're sending me to someone who maybe could say, submit an application. Here, in a nutshell, is how this would work. If doctors take patients whose conditions are known, who have been through genetic sequencing and a full biochemical workup, including registering what their conditions are, and these patients then volunteer to be part of a research program that the doctors who are doing this recommending have access to, and these research programs are centered in universities. And they are doing genetic sequencing on cannabis and full chemical profiles on cannabis, which also goes in the database. A patient who wants to participate is committing to that every time they re-up, every time they receive a sample, they will fill out a 20-question questionnaire, no essays. Check it off, circle it. We already know what their conditions are, what their makeup, what their genetic makeup, what their biochemical makeup is. All of this is on record. In order to re-up, they have to have done this. Now that we've got the QRs, it's really easy. So what's the one rule that has to change? And there is literally, you don't even have to change any law. The FDA has to allow test subjects to pay an administration fee to receive their samples. That's
Hey,
the
Wolf,
only thing that has to change.
Dom has a question
Yes.
for you.
Yes.
Yeah, so like I just want to be clear here, like this is what your ideas for Puerto Rico? Like
This idea could happen anywhere. The University of California system would be the single best suited because it has the greatest number of of major institutions and the best developed cannabis industry, and the combination of those two makes this the perfect state. But it would allow for multi-state university cooperation. It would create a 280E exempt system that's a vertically integrated, before seed to beyond sold distribution system of genetically worked up patients with known conditions, every fact we can possibly gather about how the cannabis, what its constitution is, and how it was raised, and then we set AI to crawling. Patients with this condition, the majority of patients, there's 5 clusters of patients with, let's say, hyperspasticity. And the data crawlers go, oh, look, there's clusters of ranges of constituents in the compounds that seem to be producing the best effects for patients in each of these clusters. Now we've
so
got something
Wolf,
that's worth something to big pharma. Yes,
I mean it's I love the exploration of, like a way out of this current morass. But also like
right.
you're like it's it's an idea that you have that would require a
Right.
massive amount of resources and a massive amount of political mobilization that like is completely impossible in the current context.
Oh, I understand that as things stand right now, but as they appeared then, and how
Right.
the DEA was asking
Yeah. Okay.
for.
Well, I
So
mean, now what you're
there's
getting at
this
is
big.
the kind of imagination that we were allowed to have for a moment in time
Well,
in the lead up to
but even within, as things exist now, one state could do it. California by itself, or even as a non-state, could, because the DEA implied. I mean, I'm under the impression that this kind of thing, if all the details are, you put testing. Testing is a huge issue because it's for profit.
I mean,
Get
there's
advanced
all
organic
sorts of
chem
yeah.
students doing it for money to finance the programs.
Yeah, but I'm saying that Wolf,
Just
like the idea can't go anywhere. Like California is not going to do this, and so like I guess I'm a cynic in that regard. Like my imagination has been
Yeah, I
thoroughly destroyed.
understand. And you're a realist. You're a realist. But my favorite philosopher in the world, and my favorite piece of philosophy, comes from a hockey player, Wayne the Great One Gretzky. 100% of the shots you don't take won't go in.
Yeah, but I also think picking your battles is probably like where I'm at right now.
He never learned that.
Yeah,
He
No,
hasn't learned that
it's
right.
lesson from
incredible.
before.
It's
And
incredible.
no, and I never will. I am a person who believes that if it requires that I die on the hill I'm standing on, bring it.
Yeah, I buy that.
I believe, I mean, my research now is all oriented toward letting home growers get the most, well, letting growers get the highest yields they can in the most sustainable manners they can. That's where I'm oriented. I'm big on depth carts right now. I'm big on high energy induction. If you're gonna grow, just did. I spent like my latest thing. There's a variety I've been using for a while. Grandma's peach pie. I love it. It's an early plant. I did one group of them first 2 weeks under high energy induction, other group of them under LEDs. Identical, same moms, radically different phenotypical expression. They both got moved outdoors. For one thing, HEI as an assimilation light has zero stress when you move it under the sun versus LEDs, which there is a stress period. Just this is information we need. People being able to grow their own takes the economic power out of the hands of large corporate commercial cannabis.
You know what we
Will
need,
everyone
Wolf?
grow their own? No, but everyone who can should.
You know what we need, Wolf?
The Compassionate Use Restoration and Expansion Act.
That too, but
Cure.
we need someone to roll Dominic a joint because he's smoking a roach. I feel like he's gonna light his
Oh
fucking mustache and beard on fire. Like you live in Humboldt County, bro. Like you just got this giant bag
yeah.
given to you by
It's
Jodry.
still good
And
down in
like
the oven.
I get it, but like you're gonna light your fucking mustache on fire. I'm like sitting here watching you, and like that thing is just it's gotta be hot as fuck.
Oh shit! Oh god!
Did
Hey,
I hear you
I
say
think
that Dominic's smoking something from Kevin? You're
I thought he
smoking
said
something from Kevin? Dom,
Yeah, I can roll it
did you
up.
say did what?
It's a cross
Right on,
between the
because
red
Kevin
lab pup.
is one of the people I have.
What's that?
Huh?
he was saying
Between the
that
red lab and
he
the pup.
appreciates
Cool.
Kevin.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah, this is a red lab
Ke-
pup
Ke-
cross with Skittles. Actually, I think it's pretty interesting.
oh, that's got to taste good. Oh my
Yeah,
God, that's got to taste good.
it does. It smells super good too.
Cross
Good.
Skittles with hash. Ooh.
You're muted. Not so? I can't hear you. No, it doesn't say you're muted, but I can't hear you. I cannot hear you, not so. You might have to disconnect and then come back on.
Miranda grown.
You might have to hang up and then get back on, not so. Like changing the
Okay,
angle doesn't
it
Interesting.
change the
shows you're
fact that your
muted now.
microphone's not.
Down here.
Yeah, now it says it shows you muted. Okay, he got off. He's gonna come back on.
Okay.
Yeah. How long have you been friends with Kevin?
Oh God, we've met in person just a few times at Emerald Cup, but I think we've been friends online for God at least 10 years, maybe 11 or 12. And I lust to have his Black Line Reserve. Every time I post, I tell people, or almost every time, if you got either uncrossed Kevin's Black Line Reserve or Leo's, I want both of them. I need them. They are one of the three kinds that everything I've ever seen crossed with them comes out good. The other two being Super Silver K's and G13,
Mean Gene has some of those
and to a
available, I
degree
believe.
Salad. Say
Did
again. I reached to Mean Gene and he didn't.
Ah,
and Kevin doesn't have them anymore?
Or
I don't think Kevin has them anymore.
nope. He no, he referred me to someone that does, or that he says does. So I'll get him. I mean, if I'm honest with myself, I've got so many seeds. If I grew every seed I have, I'd have to live another 30 or 40 years.
And if you told all the stories that you have to tell, you'd have to live another 30 to 40
For
years.
today, yeah.
And you'd have to
Oh
keep it
no,
at this
I
pace.
I think
You'd
I
have to
told you
keep it at this
my
furious pace.
most fun ones probably. Well, what's funny is in 43 minutes I'm on another podcast.
Oh, really? Which one's that?
Ooh, ooh. It's some folks out of Oh, it's Sue Rosen de Gregorio's. I forget what it's called. Sue Rosen de Gregorio's.
Well, if you let us know, we can tell everybody that if they haven't had enough of Wolf
Okay.
when this podcast ends, they can go and they'll see like so far we've been going for 3 hours, and I'm assuming we're gonna finish up real soon because he's got another podcast to do. He's probably got to use the restroom and get some calories in his system. But yeah, this man can talk, and he definitely should have his own podcast. I've invited him to do it on our network. We just haven't had a chance to get
I know
it
I'm
going.
committed to it.
Yeah, and so I
Now
do
that
want
I
to
have
get you.
headphones at work, it makes a difference.
Yeah, you need. I need to help you get something better because we're still getting some weird sounds out of it. But I'll help with that. It'll be worth it. The people need to hear stories about the wolf. So, and it is a testament that when you can talk and have not so sit back and not ask questions. You know. So, not so. I'm sure you have a half dozen questions you want to ask.
I mean, yeah, I
Now I put you on the spot.
now you put me on the spot. I mean, I would just I part of the issue is that you have such a depth of knowledge on such a wide variety of subjects within Canna that like you can mention something and then we go down a 20-minute rabbit hole and then another question gets asked and it's a different rabbit hole, and so it's hard to like go back. Um I would I guess this is actually from a long time ago now in the talk, but I guess I had a question of when you were figuring out Sea of Green, were you running it from seed or were you running it from
No,
clone?
from clones. And
And
this
so
is the thing.
a follow-up question just real quick is like in your group or circle, when did you like were clone because were doing indoor and stuff like that, were clones normalized and it was very early on? Like was clones normal amongst your group of friends or people you knew or people at the hydro store, things like that? So like in the early 80s is when you said you were developing the method. You guys were already on to running lots of clones then.
Okay, 79 through 81 is I'm seeing and figuring it out. 82 is the first year that I do it. 83 is the first time we write about it. But right around then, right in there, in that early 80s, between 81 and 83, clones were, that's the mother plant method. I mean, like clones were new. None of us knew about it. Once you have a proven plant, go ahead and take a clone. That was amazing new stuff. That was the mother plant method. You have a mother plant, you take clones, you grow them. And so without the mother plant method, that was part of what, you know, made it obvious to me, okay, these plants are all the same. Otherwise, these aren't all going to be the same. And but that's one of the things that Inexo is doing is they're doing seed to flower with no veg. And so which I don't get because my understanding is 12 to 14 days is pretty much. But there's also I'm not sure that what I call veg in Sea of Green isn't part of what they're calling rooting because I call it rooted as soon as the first tip of a root sticks its name out of or sticks its root its tip out of the plug.
I mean,
But
this might be
there's still a
randomly
lot more
technical.
rooted going on.
Could you talk for a second about like what was the cloning
Yeah,
tech in the early 80s? Like what were you did you know
it
about
was
rooting hormones? Did you
yeah, I was doing slice, put in dip and grow, put in at that point it was it was the Oasis things, but then
mm-hmm.
when Greg came back in 85, when Greg came back from Amsterdam from his first trip, he nagged FB Knight down in Kent into carrying Grodan. And I believe Hydrotech or Stuber's Nursery up in Marysville, up by Everett, were the first two to order them from FB Knight. And so at that point, I started using Grodan cubes.
So you were saying like Rockwell,
So
you got introduced to Rockwell sometime in the mid 80s?
yes,
Okay, so you were
that
cloning, and would you
because
say
that
that like amongst your friends who were growing indoor, were you guys all trading certain clones
a lot of
amongst each
clothes.
other?
Oh yeah,
Was that was
oh
happening?
yeah. You know, I
People
mean,
would
if it
find
works, then
clones.
that's what you want. Yes, people would find a plant and what's now called pheno hunting, and you would share it or you would breed it. Not that much longer. Is it 77 or 79 that Clark's first book comes out? Marijuana Botany. I think it's 79. It's either 77 or 79.
79.
So we're starting to do stuff there. Yeah. So a lot of this we're starting to look at that. People are starting to want to breed. When I came down when I moved to Portland from Seattle in '85, Greg and people around him were trying to breed the shortest workable tie with the stoniest workable ruderalis. And Dwight Diote, who was Neville's last housemate, says that
Mm-hmm.
Neville was doing tie to Rudy right around then too. So I don't know if it was the Seattle bunch or Neville that got to it first. Because when I moved down to Portland, I just sort of, I still stayed in touch. I was running Hydrotech Portland, but I was so busy trying to get established there that I wasn't really spending much time relating to people up north. So, I was busy meeting women and setting up grow houses.
We could do an entire podcast on what a ladies' man wolf was.
No, no, I would get in trouble. I,
But the
like most
stories are
short dudes,
there.
I would like
The
most,
stories are there.
yeah, the stories, but most guys, I think most short guys, suffer from little man thing, and honestly, I was trying to be the world's shortest giant. I would smoke more, drink more to be, like I said, the world's shortest giant to make up for all of the inadequacies that I felt from when I was a kid. I've done a lot of self-examination. When you do 15 years in prison, you get to think about a lot of things.
I have another question related to that same thing. If you can recall, how good do you think the stuff you were using to grow Sea of Green was compared to what you smoke now? Do you recall it fondly? Do you think it was like, you know?
Okay, one of the things I grew, Sea of Green, this is on into the 80s though, is I eventually named it 12K because I bought all the mothers of every known clone for $12,000. This would be 1986 or 7. Because it was the best plant for Sea of Green I'd ever seen. On one of my places, I spent over a year pulling 1 3/4 ounces per plant at 6-inch spacings. I parked it with a guy. I always tried banking everything I had with 2 people, and this
Okay.
time I parked 12K with, I'll call them Sam and Robbie, and I consoled myself almost the whole time I was in prison that, well, at least the 12K is still waiting. When I get out, there'll be the 12K, because this stuff, it was, I believe, Big Bud crossed with something that had rock in its name, because you could take it and drop it on a wood table and it sounded like you had dropped a pebble. It didn't sound like wood hitting. Well, kind of like wood hitting. It didn't sound like something soft and vegetable hitting. It knocked. Um, so I got great weight. I got dense flowers from it. It didn't have a tendency to rot, despite being as dense as it was. Um, but about 6 years, 5 years into my sentence, I look up toward administration, A&O, administration and orientation, and I see Sammy walking down across the yard. And I'm like, oh fuck, my 12K. I hope Robbie still has it. When Sam gets his stuff put on the bunk and in the locker, comes out to the yard, I start talking. He and Robbie had a big fight. He hasn't seen Robbie in a couple of years. He lost to 12K. I've been looking for that again since 2005. Um, there's one variety of Granddaddy Purple that is almost as insane. That's got a lavender tone in the flowers, and that sticks out just the tip of the big fan leaves, so it almost looks like a barrel cactus in the flower with with um, with leaf points instead of the spikes from the barrel cactus. But yeah, it was pretty good. And I paid 12K for it then, and that was a lot of money in the 80s. It's a lot of money now when you're a broke ass mofo, but it, that was one. Ah, one that everyone now wants that we may finally be figuring out how to get back to. Roadkill skunk. There was a guy in Portland who had an RKS named Jim that the Portland Hydrotech store was in a what had been a house built back when they had glassed in porches, and then it had a door in from the outside. This guy Jim would show up at the front door with a triple bagged ounce of roadkill skunk under a sweater, under a parka, outside the outer glass door with the inner glass door closed, another door to the kitchen, then down from the kitchen, a door to the stairway down to the basement. Him pulling up to the front door, I could smell when he pulled up down in the basement. It would hurt your eyes. It would make your nose burn. A lot of people want that roadkill skunk. It's what Sam bred skunk away from, what Dave bred skunk away from. A lot of people are looking for that. I have some seeds from a seed recreation that was done in '91 that I'm going to do a seed thing with. Hopefully that's there. But what is it? 5 BM thiol, I guess, is pretty big in being a precursor for that RKS smell. So we'll get RKS back. And then people will go, why do you do that? Because it kicked ass is why. It kicked. I mean, it sort of depended on where your head was at. If you wanted to be in the couch, it would knock you that way. But if you wanted to lift, it did that.
Hey, Wolf,
So
what
it was
time do you
good.
have to go?
I have to go sometime in the next 5 to 10 minutes because it's 1:31 and I have to be there at 2. So I'm probably wolf out at this point. Thank you for putting up with me. I love to talk, obviously. Dominic, I'm going to get right on that 300 presently. It's been the
I
last
don't know anything
5 years
about
have
that.
been. No, I'm
I don't know
serious.
anything about
I,
that. We are
I
on
don't.
air, Wolf.
You lend me 600.
Wolf, we are
I
on
know.
air. I don't know
I
anything
know.
about that.
No.
I
You
got the
lend.
same phone number.
You lend.
Love you, brother.
We
Yeah.
muted
It's
you,
really nice to
Wolf.
see you again.
He is the epitome of all gas, no brakes.
Yeah.
He can go
Hey,
for it.
hey, Wolf, we love you, buddy, and we
Yeah.
definitely want to have you back. We want to
Uh,
have you back on soon. Like,
and like I
and
said, once I've got the technical capabilities, I'll be happy to do a weekly show on your
so all we
network.
need to do is buy you one of these. They're Apple wired AirPods, and they work fabulous. And if you don't like putting them in your
Huh?
ear, they have things like that can kind of like make them a little bit more comfortable.
Yeah.
But I'm wearing my hat today, which helps. But yeah,
Okay.
they're 15
Yeah.
bucks and they work good. And I have a microphone I
Oh,
can
okay.
send you
Well, I
because I'm
know
getting
that.
another microphone.
Cool.
I want us to have the farmer in the sky again. We need the farmer in the sky. And you know what? I think for Wolf's health, he needs to be able to get this stuff out. He has so much trapped inside of him, so much, so many stories and so much knowledge, and it's just like, and then when he gets an opportunity, it's like, it all comes out at the same time, and not everyone can operate at the speed. So one thing you can do with YouTube is you can slow things down. You can speed it up, but I think you could also slow it down. Maybe if you slowed it down to like zero point 0.5, you could um, understand Wolf a little bit better. But yeah, Wolf, we love you, and I'm grateful for you, buddy. Thanks for helping me honor um, my
Thanks for
friend
having us
today,
on again.
my
Yeah.
friend Riley.
I mean,
That was fun.
I would also say just from
I,
like
I
Go ahead, Notso.
just from like something I was thinking about because Dominic is doing a bunch of these interviews and stuff like that with people. I have noticed like when you talk to like Gabby mentioned about like people call us OGs, but like there's like a whole older generation, and then it's like there's a it's not everyone obviously, but there's a type of person when you talk to them that like countercultural, really intelligent, very curious, willing to push boundaries, willing to take risks. you know, and sort of like, I mean, obviously you can tell part of the reason why you talk so fast is there's a lot of passion and interest behind the subject matter, and he's like excited to share it and stuff like that. And just so people listening know, it's like some of the questions I asked are because a lot of the stuff that he was talking about, there wasn't marijuana botany out. There wasn't lots of books out. There wasn't forums. There wasn't ways where you could just learn. A lot of his grow store experience, I didn't really touch on that too much, but I bet when he was talking to people in line, like he said, there was people that were learning off others' experiences all the time because it was brand new and there was very little written information that was accessible about it, and you had to apply it to like what you were doing, and so like now people can just hop online and there's so many different resources and there's so many different ways you can like hire irrigation people to build out your facility. You can, just all kinds of stuff. And back in his time, growers kind of had to be like mini electricians, mini framers, mini plumbers. They had to learn about, I don't want to get them started again, but PAR and like and light spectrum and all that type of stuff and how it affected things. And all that was sort of like in my opinion, like as part of like figuring out how to grow better weed, figuring out how to get what you want. And it's taken decades, since like the max since Mela Tips, was like, he called it the forum before the forums. It was where people could gather and share experiences on how to grow this stuff, and then you figure stuff out and then people build off of that, and then like you don't know what's common knowledge when it's not common knowledge.
And it's also what got them busted.
Yeah, and like so there's a whole like it ties in. There's a social element, there's a political element, there's a prison element, there's a science bit, and a lot of old growers that are like that, like incorporate a bunch of those different things, because you had to be really curious, you had to want to figure it out. And I find that really endearing actually, because, I just do. So I just wanted him to hear that before he left, that like, they really had to, I mean, I think like marijuana botany, for instance, was like the first time that tons of people could read how the plant worked, how to flower it the right way. Why did it trigger into flowering? Why didn't it? The basic biology. And in the early 70s, when he was growing a lot of seeds from import, it's like none of that stuff was well known or maybe even known. People were just experimenting, So yeah.
They were figuring it out together.
Mm-hmm. Very much so.
Well, we appreciate you, Wolf.
Yeah.
What was the other podcast you were gonna do?
I tried looking it up, but I've been so caught up here. I'm gonna head over to it. Let me see if I can find it. She sent me the thing on here, I think. It is on 5 p.m. Eastern time, and it's at StreamYard. It's
No, StreamYard's what you're
Let
using.
me
What's
see.
the name of the podcast?
Well, this is also going to be on StreamYard, apparently.
Yeah, I know, but
Unless I just
that's not how people are going to find you. That's like more like the app that you're going to use to
That's not-
record it.
Okay. Well, I
We'll
I'm
get
not
it. We'll
finding
find.
it,
Don't
and-
stress about it.
We'll find
you.
it. Yeah. We'll find you, buddy.
All right,
Hey,
I gotta go.
Bye,
gotta
buddy.
go.
Enjoy your day.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Hey, remember to leave your
guys.
browser.
I'll leave it open. Yep.
Remember, everyone, to leave it open until it says that it's fully uploaded. Okay.
You got it.
Okay. All right. Thanks.